Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. My name is Mason Archer, and I have served as an Alaska State Trooper for 16 years. During that time, I have retrieved bodies from rivers, tracked hunters lost in blizzards fierce enough to strip bones bare, and sat with families who already knew their loved ones would not return home, yet needed to hear it from an official. I've learned that Alaska doesn't forgive mistakes. It doesn't care about your training, your equipment, or how many times you've survived before. It waits patiently and calmly for you to make a mistake. But there are some cases that don't fit into neat report columns. Some that you can't close no matter how many forms you fill out or how many times you go over the evidence. This is one of those cases, and even now, 12 years later, I still dream about that cabin. Still see that light burning in the window where no light should have been. It was late November, a month when most of the day was spent in darkness, and no matter how well you dressed for winter, the cold penetrated to your bones. We received a call from a supply pilot making his routine flight to the scattered farms near the Kuskokwim River. He reported smoke coming from a cabin that should have been abandoned. The cabin belonged to a hunter named Vernon Hayes, who had died 3 winters earlier. Everyone knew Vernon. He was one of the old settlers who came to Alaska in the 70s, back when you could just disappear if you wanted to. When they found him, he had probably been dead for 2 weeks, frozen stiff in his bed. The coroner said he died of natural causes. His heart had stopped in his sleep one night. The cabin should have been empty. Vernon had no family, no one to inherit the place. It was too far out for anyone to bother with. Too isolated even by Alaska standards. 40 miles from the nearest village, accessible only by plane or snow machine, and even then only if you knew exactly where you were going. The land was federal, so technically the cabin would just rot back into the tundra eventually. That's how it usually goes out here. But the pilot swore he'd seen smoke. Said it was coming from the chimney clear as day. A steady column rising into that gray November sky. He'd circled twice to make sure, and that's when he noticed something else. There was a light in the window, not flickering like a candle or a fire. Steady, electric. That didn't make sense. Vernon's cabin had no electricity. He'd lived by kerosene lamps and candles, same as he'd done for 40 years. The pilot knew this because he'd been dropping supplies to Vernon for over a decade. He knew that cabin as well as anyone, and he knew something was wrong. My sergeant assigned me and a ranger named Garrett Cole to check it out. Garrett was Forest Service, but he knew the backcountry better than anyone in the district. He'd been the one to find Vernon's body 3 years earlier, so he knew exactly where the cabin was. We loaded up the departmental snow machines with enough gear for 3 days, though we figured we'd be back by nightfall. Probably just some squatter, we told ourselves. Maybe someone's trapline shack got snowed in and they broke into Vernon's place for shelter. It happens sometimes. We left early morning, when the sun was just starting to think about rising. The temperature was sitting at -20, and that was before wind chill. The sky was that particular shade of gray that means snow is coming, the kind of gray that makes everything look flat and distant. We followed the frozen river north, our machines cutting through fresh powder, our headlights boring into the half-darkness. It took us 6 hours to reach the area. The terrain out there is deceptive, all rolling tundra and scattered spruce, everything covered in snow that makes landmarks disappear. But Garrett knew the way. We stopped twice to check the GPS and warm our hands over the engines. The second time we stopped, Garrett looked at me and said something I still remember word for word. "You ever been out to Vernon's place before?" I told him no. "It's strange out there," he said. "Even when Vernon was alive, it felt wrong somehow. Like the land doesn't want people there." I asked him what he meant, but he just shook his head and started his machine again. Garrett wasn't the superstitious type, so hearing him say something like that should have been a warning. Should have made me suggest we turn around and wait for better weather, more daylight, something. But I didn't. We kept going. We found the cabin just as the early winter darkness was starting to settle. It appeared out of the snow and spruce like something from a dream, a small, dark shape against the white landscape. And there it was, exactly like the pilot had said. Smoke rising from the chimney. And in the single window facing us, a light burning steady and yellow. We cut our engines about 50 yards out and just sat there for a minute, watching. The silence that followed was absolute. No wind, no birds, nothing. Just that smoke rising and that light burning. "Someone's definitely in there," Garrett said. His voice sounded too loud in all that quiet. We approached on foot, and that's when I started noticing the details that didn't fit. The snow around the cabin was undisturbed except for our own tracks. No snow machine tracks, no ski trails, no footprints. Nothing. The cabin sat in its clearing like it had been dropped there from the sky, completely isolated from anything that might have brought a person to it. Garrett saw it too. He stopped about 20 feet from the door and pulled his sidearm. I did the same. We're trained to expect the unexpected, but this was something else. Someone was inside that cabin, keeping a fire going and a light burning, but they'd left no trace of how they'd gotten there. "State Trooper," I called out. "We need you to come to the door with your hands visible." Nothing. Just that light in the window and smoke from the chimney. I called out again, louder this time. Still nothing. We moved to the door. It was unlocked. That was the first thing that really got under my skin. Vernon had been a careful man, the kind who locked his door even out here in the middle of nowhere. But the door swung open when I pushed it, and we stepped inside. The cabin was warm. That was the first thing I noticed. Not just warm, but comfortable, like someone had been tending the fire for hours. The wood stove in the corner radiated heat, and I could see fresh logs stacked beside it. On the small table near the window sat a kerosene lamp, burning steady, casting that yellow light we'd seen from outside. But there was no one there. The cabin was a single room, maybe 15 feet by 15 feet. There was nowhere to hide. We checked anyway, looked under the bed, opened the small closet. Nothing. Empty. On the table, next to the lamp, was a cup. I touched it, still warm. Tea, from the smell of it. The cup was maybe half full, and when I looked closer I could see a faint wisp of steam still rising from the surface. Garrett and I looked at each other. Neither of us said anything for a moment. What was there to say? Someone had been here minutes ago, maybe seconds ago, but there was no sign of them now, and no way they could have left without us seeing them. I walked to the window and looked out. Our snow machine tracks were clear in the failing light. 2 lines cutting through the pristine snow. Nothing else. No footprints leading away from the cabin. No tracks of any kind except ours leading in. "Maybe they're still here," Garrett said, but his voice had no conviction. We'd already searched. There was nowhere to hide. That's when I noticed the footprints inside the cabin. Not immediately obvious, but there in the thin layer of dust on the floor. Boot prints, fairly fresh, crisscrossing the small space. I followed them with my flashlight. They went from the bed to the stove, from the stove to the table, from the table to the door. But here's what made my skin crawl. The prints at the door didn't point outward, like someone leaving. They pointed inward, like someone had walked backward into the cabin, or like something had walked through the door without opening it. I showed Garrett. He stared at those prints for a long time before speaking. "That's not right," he said quietly. No, it wasn't right. Nothing about this was right. We searched more carefully then, looking for anything that might explain what we were seeing. The cabin was exactly as Vernon had left it, as far as we could tell. His traps hung on the wall, his clothes still in the closet. Even his books were on the shelf by the bed, the same books Garrett remembered from when he'd found Vernon's body. But someone had been using the cabin. Recently. The wood stove was hot, the lamp was burning, that cup of tea was still warm. And there were other signs too, small things. The bed was made, but with different blankets than Vernon had used. There were cans of food on the shelf that weren't there before, modern brands that Vernon had never bought. Someone was living here, or at least visiting regularly. "We need to wait," I said. "Whoever it is, they'll come back." Garrett didn't like that idea. I could see it in his face, but he nodded. We were cops, and this was a mystery that needed solving. So we settled in to wait. We took turns watching out the window as night fell completely. The darkness out there is different from anywhere else I've ever been. It's not just the absence of light. It's something heavier. Something that presses against the windows like it's trying to get in. The temperature dropped fast once the sun was gone, and even with the wood stove burning, I could feel the cold seeping through the walls. Around 8 o'clock, Garrett made coffee on Vernon's old propane camp stove. We sat at the table, not talking much, just watching and waiting. The lamp still burned, and outside, our snow machines sat like sleeping animals in the darkness. That's when we heard it. A sound from outside, faint but distinct. Footsteps in snow. We were on our feet instantly, weapons drawn. The footsteps came closer, crunching in the snow, steady and unhurried. They came right up to the door and stopped. "State Trooper," I called out. "Identify yourself." Silence. Then the door handle turned. I won't lie to you. My hand was shaking. Something about this whole situation had my nerves on edge in a way that no dangerous call had ever done. The door swung open, and I found myself pointing my weapon at empty darkness. There was no one there. Garrett moved to the door and shone his flashlight out into the night. The snow around the cabin was undisturbed. No footprints. Nothing. But we'd both heard those steps, clear as anything, coming right up to the door. "Wind," Garrett said. But he didn't believe it any more than I did. There was no wind that night. The air was still and cold and dead silent. We closed the door. Neither of us sat back down. We just stood there watching the door, waiting for something else to happen. The lamp flickered once, and my heart nearly stopped. But then it steadied again. An hour passed, then another. Nothing happened. The cabin stayed warm and quiet, and outside the darkness pressed against the windows. Around midnight, Garrett said he was going to check the snow machines, make sure they'd start in the morning. I told him I'd come with him, but he said one of us should stay inside, keep watch in case whoever lived here came back. I wish I'd insisted. I wish I'd made him stay inside with me. He stepped out into that darkness, and I watched from the window as his flashlight beam swept across the snow. He walked to the machines, maybe 40 feet from the cabin. I saw him check the first one, then move to the second. Then his flashlight went out. Just like that. 1 second it was on, the next it was dark. I called out to him through the window. No response. I grabbed my own flashlight and went to the door, but the moment I opened it, I felt something that made me stop cold. The air outside had changed. It was colder, yes, but more than that. It felt thick somehow, heavy, like trying to breathe underwater. And there was a smell, faint but distinct, something organic and wrong, like meat left too long in the sun, even though everything out there was frozen solid. "Garrett!" I called again. My voice didn't carry. It fell flat in the darkness like the air was swallowing it. I stepped outside, my flashlight cutting through the dark. I could see our snow machines. I could not see Garrett. I moved toward where I'd last seen him, my heart hammering, my breath coming in white clouds. The snow around the machines was undisturbed except for Garrett's tracks leading to them, but the tracks just stopped. Right there, next to the second machine, they ended. No sign of a struggle, no indication of where he'd gone. His tracks came to that spot and simply ceased to exist. I called his name over and over. I searched in widening circles, my flashlight beam slashing through the darkness. Nothing. He was gone. I won't pretend I was brave about what I did next. I ran back to the cabin. I didn't walk, I ran, and I slammed the door behind me and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely work my radio. I called for backup, tried to explain what had happened, but I don't think I made much sense. The dispatcher kept asking me to repeat myself, to clarify. But how do you clarify something like this? My partner just vanished in the snow, I told them. No tracks, no sign of him. Just gone. They said they'd send someone at first light. That was 4 hours away. I sat at that table with my weapon drawn, watching the door, watching the window, my back to the wall. The lamp still burned. The fire in the stove still crackled. And I was completely alone in a cabin that should have been abandoned, 40 miles from anything resembling help. Around 2 in the morning, I heard it again. Footsteps outside, slow, deliberate, circling the cabin. I didn't call out this time. I just listened as whatever it was walked around the cabin. Once, twice, 3 times. Then the steps came to the door and stopped. The door handle turned. I'd locked it, but the handle turned anyway, all the way until the latch clicked. The door didn't open. Whatever was outside tested it once, twice, then stopped. Then came the tapping at the window. Soft at first, then harder. Not random, not like wind-blown debris. Rhythmic, deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't look. I kept my eyes on the door, my weapon pointed at it. And I didn't look at that window no matter how much I wanted to. Because something told me, some deep animal instinct, that if I looked, if I saw what was making that sound, something terrible would happen. The tapping stopped. More footsteps, moving away from the cabin now, getting fainter. Then silence. I stayed awake the rest of that night. I fed the fire when it got low, and I kept that lamp burning, and I didn't move from that chair. As dawn finally started to break, gray light seeping into the sky, I heard the distant sound of snow machines. Backup arriving. 2 troopers and a search and rescue team. They found me, still sitting at that table, and I know I must have looked half crazy. They searched for Garrett. They searched for 3 days, bringing in dogs and a helicopter. They found nothing. No body, no tracks, no sign of him beyond that spot next to the snow machine where his footprints ended. They questioned me extensively. Where had he gone? Had we argued? Was I sure about what I'd seen? I told them everything, exactly as it happened, and I could see in their eyes that they thought I'd either killed him or had some kind of breakdown. They found no evidence of foul play, though, and eventually, they had to let it go. Garrett Cole was listed as missing, presumed dead, lost in the wilderness. It happens. But I know what I saw, I know what I heard. And I know that Garrett didn't just wander off into the darkness. Something took him. They closed the cabin up after that, boarded the windows, put a chain on the door, As far as I know, no one's been back since. I never went back. I couldn't. The case remains open in the files, a cold case that will never be solved because the truth is too impossible to put in a report. But here's the thing that keeps me awake some nights. About 6 months after Garrett disappeared, I was going through old case files in the archives looking for something unrelated when I came across a file from 1987, a missing person case. A wildlife biologist had vanished while doing a survey in the same area. They'd found his camp undisturbed, his equipment all there, but no sign of him. His footprints in the snow just stopped, the report said, ended in the middle of nowhere. I kept digging, found another case from 1979. A trapper who disappeared, same area. Tracks that ended abruptly, never found. And in 1962, a hunting guide and his client, same thing, gone without a trace. All of them within 8 miles of Vernon Hayes's cabin. The cabin that shouldn't have had light. I think about Vernon sometimes, dying alone in that cabin. Natural causes, they said. Heart failure. But I wonder what he saw in those last moments. I wonder if he heard footsteps outside, heard that tapping at the window. I wonder if he knew what was out there with him. Last year, I was in Anchorage for a training conference. I ran into the pilot who'd reported the smoke from Vernon's cabin, the one who started this whole thing. We got to talking, and I asked him if he'd flown over that area recently. He had, just a few weeks earlier. "You see anything?" I asked. He looked at me for a long time before answering. Then he said, there was smoke coming from the chimney, and a light in the window. I didn't ask anything else. Didn't want to know. Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that warm cup of tea sitting on the table. I think about those footprints pointing the wrong way. I think about Garrett's flashlight going dark and his tracks ending in the snow. And I think about how somewhere out there, in a cabin that should be empty, a lamp still burns in the window, and something walks through the snow without leaving tracks, and the door handle turns even though there's no one on the other side. The case file sits in my desk drawer at home, not at the office. I take it out sometimes, read through my own reports, look at the photos we took. There's one photo in particular I keep coming back to. It's a shot of the cabin from outside, taken the morning after Garrett disappeared. You can see the window, see that lamp still burning inside, but if you look closely, really closely at the glass, you can see something else. A reflection maybe, or a shadow. Something standing just behind the window, watching the camera. It's not clear enough to make out details, just a dark shape that shouldn't be there because I was alone in that cabin, and I was the one who took that photo. I've never shown anyone that picture. I've never told anyone about the shape in the window. What would be the point? They already think I'm damaged goods from this case. Adding more crazy wouldn't help, but I know what I saw. I know Garrett was real, and his disappearance was real, and something lives in that wilderness around Vernon's cabin, something that doesn't leave tracks and doesn't show up until after dark and takes people without a sound. I've been a trooper for 16 years. I've seen what isolation and cold can do to people's minds. I know about cabin fever and hypothermia and how the darkness can play tricks on you. I know all the rational explanations. But I also know what I saw. And I know that rationality only goes so far in a place like Alaska, where the darkness owns half the year, and the cold can kill you in minutes, and there are stretches of wilderness where no human foot has ever stepped. Some places don't want us. Some places have their own rules, their own inhabitants, their own ways of dealing with intruders. And Vernon's cabin sits in the heart of one of those places. Garrett's family still calls me sometimes. They want closure. They want to know what happened to him. I tell them I don't know, which is partly true. I don't know exactly what happened, but I know enough. I know he walked 40 feet into the darkness, and something was waiting for him. Something that had been waiting for decades, maybe longer, and would keep waiting long after I'm gone. The official investigation concluded that Garrett died of exposure, that he wandered away from the cabin in the darkness and got lost. They never found a body, but that happens sometimes. Alaska has a way of keeping its dead. But I was there. I heard those footsteps. I watched his tracks end in the middle of nothing. And I sat in that cabin while something walked around it, testing the door, tapping at the window, wanting in. Last month I put in for a transfer to Juneau. Anywhere away from the interior, away from that vast expanse of tundra and forest and frozen rivers. My request was approved. I leave in 3 weeks. I told myself I'm not running away. I told myself it's time for a change. Time to be closer to civilization. Time to work different kinds of cases. But that's a lie. I'm running. Running from a case that won't close, from questions that have no answers, from the memory of a warm cup of tea in an empty cabin and the sound of footsteps in the snow. Garrett Cole is still listed as missing. The case is still open. And every winter, when the darkness comes back and the temperature drops, and the snow covers everything in white silence, I wonder if someone else will see smoke rising from Vernon's cabin. I wonder if they'll see that light burning in the window, and I wonder if they'll be stupid enough to go inside. 3 nights ago, I had a dream. I was back at the cabin, standing in the clearing, watching that light in the window. The door opened, and Garrett stepped out. He looked at me, and his eyes were wrong somehow. Too dark, too empty. He smiled, and his teeth were too white in the darkness. "It's warm inside," he said. "Come in, have some tea." I woke up with my heart pounding, and I couldn't get back to sleep. I sat up the rest of the night, lights on, door locked, telling myself it was just a dream. But when I finally did drift off near dawn, I could have sworn I heard it. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Footsteps in the snow outside my window, and the soft tap, tap, tap of something testing the glass, wanting in. I don't go outside after dark anymore, not if I can help it. I know how that sounds, I know what it means, but some things, once you've seen them, once you've felt them pressing at you in the darkness, you can't unsee, you can't unfeel. The lamp is still burning in Vernon's cabin. The smoke still rises from the chimney, and somewhere in the snow, Garrett's last footprints remain, frozen in place, ending where they should begin. I'm leaving Alaska in 3 weeks, but I don't think it matters. I don't think distance matters when it comes to things like this, because sometimes, when the night is very quiet and very dark, I can feel it. That same thick, heavy air I felt outside the cabin, that same wrong smell, and I know, somehow I know, that the door handle is turning somewhere, testing, waiting, and one day, maybe soon, maybe years from now, I'll hear those footsteps again, and this time there won't be a locked door between us. This time I won't be able to run. Vernon knew. That's why he died the way he did. Alone in his bed, door locked, lamp burning. He knew what was out there. He knew that eventually the locks don't hold, and the lamp goes dark, and the thing that walks without tracks comes inside. The case file says heart failure, natural causes. But I've seen the autopsy photos that weren't included in the public record. I've seen Vernon's face, frozen in his last moment. I've seen his eyes, wide open, staring at something that terrified him beyond anything the human heart could bear. That's what killed him. Not time, not cold, not age. Fear. Pure animal fear of something standing at the foot of his bed. Something that had finally found a way inside. I think about that every night now. I think about Vernon dying in terror, and Garrett vanishing in the darkness, and all those others before them, lost in the snow without a trace. And I think about that lamp still burning, 40 miles from anywhere in a cabin that should be empty. Sometimes I wonder if I should go back, try to understand what's there, try to document it, try to warn people, but I know I won't, because going back means becoming what Garrett became. It means walking 40 feet into the darkness and finding out what waits there. It means leaving tracks that end in nothing and becoming another unsolved case, another missing person, another name in the files. So I'm leaving instead, running to Juneau, to the coast, to somewhere with streetlights and neighbors and doors that lock and stay locked. But I know it won't matter. Not really. Because I've seen the thing I wasn't supposed to see. I've been marked by it somehow, chosen or noticed or remembered. And the lamp is still burning. 3 weeks, that's all I have left. 3 weeks until I leave this place and try to forget. But forgetting isn't possible. The human mind doesn't work that way. It holds on to trauma, replays it, returns to it again and again, like a tongue to a broken tooth. I'll leave Alaska, but Alaska won't leave me. And neither will that cabin or that light, or the sound of footsteps circling in the snow. Last night I packed my belongings, getting ready for the move. At the bottom of a box, I found something I'd forgotten I had. Garrett's spare flashlight. He'd left it in my snow machine the morning we'd headed out to the cabin. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands, and without thinking, I pressed the switch. It turned on. The battery was dead years ago. Should have been dead. But it turned on and the beam was bright and steady. I dropped it, and it rolled across the floor, that beam of light cutting through my apartment, illuminating nothing and everything. It's still on. I haven't touched it. It's been 18 hours and the light is still bright, and the battery that should have died years ago is still going. And I know without any doubt what this means. The thing from the cabin found me. It knows where I am. And it's telling me that distance doesn't matter, that running won't help, that there's nowhere I can go where it can't follow. In 2 hours, it will be dark. And when the darkness comes, I know I'll hear them. The footsteps outside my door, slow and steady and patient. The door handle will turn. The lock will hold, for tonight, maybe for tomorrow night. But locks don't last forever. Doors don't hold forever. And eventually, the thing that took Garrett, that made Vernon's heart stop from fear, that has been waiting in the snow and darkness for longer than any of us can imagine, will find its way inside. The flashlight is still on, and I'm watching it burn, knowing that when it finally goes dark, that's when I'll hear the first footstep on my stairs. I should call someone, should tell someone what's happening. But who would believe me? Who would understand? And what could they do anyway? How do you fight something that doesn't leave tracks? How do you hide from something that knows exactly where you are? So I'm writing this instead. Writing it down so there's a record, so someone will know. When they find me, and they will find me, maybe this will explain something. Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll just be the ravings of a cop who lost his mind in the wilderness. But I know the truth. And the truth is that some places in Alaska are older than us, stranger than us, and they don't follow our rules. They have their own inhabitants, their own guardians, their own ways of dealing with those who trespass. Vernon's cabin sits in the heart of one of those places. And I went there. I stepped through that door into warmth and light, and I drank from the cup that shouldn't have been warm. I became part of whatever ceremony or ritual or pattern exists in that isolated clearing. And now, it's my turn. The flashlight is starting to flicker. The sun is setting outside my window, and in the growing darkness, I can hear it now, faint but getting closer. Footsteps on the stairs, steady and unhurried and absolutely certain. The door handle is starting to turn, and I know that this time I cannot run anymore because there is nowhere left to go. My name is Mason Archer, and I've been an Alaska State Trooper for 16 years, and this is my last report, and the lamp in Vernon's cabin is still burning, and the footsteps have reached my door. My name is Cole Briggs, and I've worked as an Alaska State Trooper for 13 years. Most of that time has been spent in the interior, where the distances are vast and the population is scattered thin across a landscape that doesn't care whether you live or die. I've learned to read terrain the way some people read books, learned to spot the signs of hypothermia before it's too late, learned to accept that sometimes people just vanish, and there's nothing you can do about it except fill out the paperwork and tell the family you're sorry. But there's one case that I can't accept. One disappearance that doesn't follow any pattern I've ever seen. Even now, 7 years later, I still look for that trail every time I'm in the backcountry. Still scan the tree line for something that shouldn't be there but is. And some nights when the wind is howling outside my house and the temperature drops below zero, I dream about a man walking into a storm with his back to me, never turning around, never stopping, just walking toward something I couldn't see. It happened in March, during that unpredictable time when winter is trying to decide whether to let go or dig in for another month. We got a call from Denali National Park. A hiker had failed to check in at the ranger station. His name was David Morse, 42 years old, experienced outdoorsman from Seattle. He'd filed a backcountry permit for a 5-day solo trek along the Savage River Loop, a route that's challenging but not extreme if you know what you're doing. Morse knew what he was doing. He'd been hiking in Alaska for 15 years, had summited Denali twice, worked as a wilderness guide in the summers. This wasn't some tourist who'd wandered off the main trail. The Park Service had already started a search when they called us in. They'd found his camp on the second day of looking. Tent still standing, gear organized, everything in its place. But no sign of Morse. What made them call us instead of handling it themselves was what they found at the campsite. Or rather, what they didn't find. I drove out there with a park ranger named Sarah Chen. She'd been one of the first to reach Morse's camp, and during the 2-hour drive, she kept going over what they'd discovered, like she was trying to make sense of it. His boots were in the tent, she said. A sleeping bag laid out like he'd been planning to use it. Food hung properly in a bear bag. Everything by the book. I asked her what was unusual about that. His tracks, she said. They left the camp in his socks. Just walked straight out into the bush and kept going. That got my attention. March in Denali, temperatures dropping below zero at night, and an experienced hiker walks out of camp in his socks. People do strange things when hypothermia sets in, but Morse's camp showed no signs of distress or confusion. Everything was orderly, methodical, the work of someone thinking clearly. We reached the search base camp around noon. They'd set up near Morse's abandoned tent, and there were maybe a dozen searchers getting ready to head out in teams. The search coordinator briefed me on what they knew. Morse had checked in with the ranger station 3 days ago, at the start of his trek. His permit had him camping at designated sites along the loop. He'd been expected back yesterday. When he didn't show, they'd started looking. The tent was exactly as Sarah had described it. A small, 2-person backpacking tent, properly staked despite the wind. Inside, his sleeping bag was unrolled but not slept in. His boots sat next to the tent flap, laces loosened like he'd just taken them off. A headlamp hung from the tent's interior loop. His pack was there, food and water accounted for. Even his jacket was inside, folded neatly. But here's what made my skin crawl. His wallet sat on top of the folded jacket. Open. Driver's license removed and placed carefully beside it, face up, like he wanted someone to identify him. like he was leaving it behind on purpose. Sarah showed me the tracks. They started right at the tent entrance, clear impressions in a patch of snow. Sock prints, unmistakable. They headed west, away from the established trail, straight towards the mountains. We followed them for about 200 yards before they reached bare ground and disappeared. "We've searched in that direction for 3 miles, Sarah said. Nothing, no more tracks, no sign of him. It's like he just evaporated." I asked if there were any other trails out that way, any reason someone would head in that direction. "No," she said. "There's nothing out there. The terrain gets rougher, steeper. In socks, in this weather, he wouldn't make it more than a mile or 2 before frostbite set in." We organized the search teams and headed out. I took a team of 3, including Sarah, and we moved in the direction of Morse's last tracks. The terrain was brutal. Thick brush, loose scree, patches of snow that hid uneven ground. Every few minutes someone would call a halt and we'd spread out, looking for any sign. A piece of clothing, a drop of blood, anything. We found nothing. By late afternoon, the wind started picking up. Dark clouds rolled in from the west, moving fast. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in as many minutes. Sarah checked her radio and got word that a storm was coming in hard and fast. We had maybe 2 hours before it hit. That's when I saw it. Not a track exactly, but a disturbance in the snow on a small ridge about 50 yards ahead. I called to the others and we climbed up to investigate. There were marks in the snow. Not footprints, but something else. Long, shallow depressions, parallel lines, like something had been dragged. They ran along the ridge for maybe 30 feet, then disappeared over the edge. We looked over the edge. Below us, the ground dropped away sharply, falling into a narrow ravine filled with stunted spruce and tangled brush. At the bottom, barely visible in the failing light, I saw a patch of color that didn't belong. Blue fabric. We scrambled down, moving as fast as we could safely manage. The fabric was a sock. One of Morse's socks, judging by the size and the fact that it was soaked with blood. Sarah bagged it while I searched the immediate area. That's when I found the second thing. A piece of paper weighted down with a rock, tucked under a small overhang where it had stayed dry. I unfolded it carefully. It was a page torn from a notebook, and written on it in pencil were 4 words. "Don't follow the trail." The handwriting was shaky but legible. I compared it to the signature on Morse's permit. Same person. "What trail?" Sarah asked, looking around. There was no trail here, just wilderness. I didn't have an answer. We searched until the storm hit, which was earlier than predicted and harder than expected. The wind came first, a howling blast that nearly knocked me off my feet. Then the snow, thick and blinding. Within minutes, visibility dropped to almost nothing. Sarah called it. We had to get back to base camp before we became victims ourselves. The trek back was a nightmare. The wind screamed through the trees, and the snow came at us sideways, stinging any exposed skin. We stayed roped together, following Sarah's GPS, trusting that the technology would get us home. It took us 3 hours to cover the 1.5 miles back to base camp. 3 hours of fighting through wind and snow and cold that cut through every layer of clothing. By the time we reached the tents, I couldn't feel my hands or feet. The search coordinator pulled us inside, and we huddled around a portable heater, slowly coming back to life. The storm raged outside, shaking the tent walls, screaming through the night. "We'll resume at first light," the coordinator said. "Weather's supposed to clear by dawn." But I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that note. Don't follow the trail. What trail? And why leave a warning? Was Morse trying to help us or warn us away? Around 3 a.m, I heard something over the sound of the storm. A voice, faint but distinct, calling out. I sat up, listening. There it was again. Someone shouting, but I couldn't make out the words. I shook Sarah awake. "Do you hear that?" She listened, then nodded. "Someone's out there." We woke the others. Everyone heard it now. A voice, definitely human, calling from somewhere beyond the camp. The coordinator grabbed a radio and did a head count. Everyone was accounted for. All the searchers were in their tents. So, who was out there? I volunteered to check it out. Sarah said she'd come with me. We geared up, grabbed flashlights and safety lines, and stepped out into the storm. The cold hit like a physical force, and the wind nearly tore the door from Sarah's hands. We clipped our safety lines to the tent and moved out, following the sound of the voice. It was hard to pinpoint the direction. The wind carried the sound, twisted it, made it seem like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere. We moved slowly, our flashlight beams useless in the blowing snow. The voice kept calling, always just ahead of us, always out of reach. We'd gone maybe 100 yards when Sarah grabbed my arm. "Cole, look!" She pointed with her flashlight. There, just at the edge of our light's reach, was a figure. Standing in the storm, not moving, facing away from us. Dark jacket, dark pants, no hat or gloves. Just standing there like the cold didn't matter. "Hey!" I shouted. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The figure didn't respond, didn't turn around, just stood there. We moved closer. The wind made every step a struggle, and the snow was getting deeper. 50 yards away now, then 40. I could see details. The jacket was torn, hanging off one shoulder. The person's hair was long and moving in the wind, but they still didn't turn around. 30 yards, 20. "Morse?" Sarah called out. "David Morse, is that you?" The figure finally moved, not turning around, but raising one arm, pointing ahead into the storm, into the darkness beyond our lights. Then it started walking, not stumbling or struggling through the snow, but walking steadily, easily, like it was on a flat sidewalk instead of in the middle of a blizzard. Just walking away from us, deeper into the storm. We tried to follow. I don't know why. Every instinct said to turn back, get to shelter, but we followed. The figure stayed just ahead of us, always at the edge of our light, never turning around, never stopping, just walking. We followed for maybe 10 minutes before Sarah's GPS started acting strange. The screen flickered, then went dark, then came back showing impossible coordinates. We were moving west according to the device, but the compass on my jacket said we were heading south, then north, then directions that didn't exist. "We need to go back," Sarah said. Her voice was scared, and Sarah didn't scare easily. I agreed this was wrong, all of it. We turned around to head back to camp, following our safety line. But the line didn't lead back to camp. It led to a tree that shouldn't have been there, a twisted spruce that I didn't remember passing, and beyond it, nothing but storm and darkness. We were lost. Sarah tried the radio. Static. The GPS was still showing nonsense coordinates. My compass spun lazily, never settling on a direction. We stood there in the blowing snow, and I felt something I'd never felt before in all my years in Alaska. Not fear exactly, but a deeper certainty that we'd made a terrible mistake, that we'd followed something we shouldn't have, and now we were somewhere we shouldn't be. "We follow the wind," I said. The wind was coming from the west, we knew that. If we kept it at our backs, we'd be heading east, back toward camp. Basic wilderness survival. We walked. The storm seemed to get worse instead of better. The wind howled, and the snow came harder, and the cold bit deeper. My flashlight was dimming, the battery dying too fast. Sarah's was already out. We walked in near darkness, stumbling over hidden rocks, pushing through brush that tore at our clothes. Then I saw it, a light ahead, flickering like a campfire. Hope surged through me. Someone had made camp, someone who could help us. We pushed toward it, moving faster now, desperate for warmth and safety. The light grew brighter. We could see it clearly now, a steady glow through the trees. We broke through a line of spruce and found ourselves on a trail. An actual trail, clear and defined, cutting through the forest. We'd been looking for trails all day and found nothing, but here one was, and I could see boot prints in the snow, fresh, leading in both directions. "Where the hell did this come from?" Sarah whispered. "I didn't know. It shouldn't be here. We'd covered this area and there was no trail, but here it was, and it led toward that light, which was closer now, just around a bend ahead. We followed the trail. We shouldn't have, I know that now, but we did. We were cold and lost and desperate, and the trail was there, so we followed it. Around the bend, we found the source of the light. A cabin, small, made of dark logs, a single window glowing with firelight. Smoke rose from a metal chimney pipe. It looked warm and safe and impossible. Sarah and I looked at each other. Neither of us knew what to say. There were no cabins out here. We'd studied the maps, knew every structure in this part of the park. This cabin didn't exist, but it was right there in front of us, solid and real, and I was so cold I couldn't feel my legs anymore. I walked to the door. It was unlocked. I pushed it open and warm air rolled out, carrying the smell of wood smoke and something else, something organic and slightly wrong. "Hello?" I called inside. "Anyone home? We're lost. We need help." No answer. The cabin was a single room, maybe 15 feet square, a wood stove in one corner, glowing hot, a cot along one wall, a small table with 2 chairs, and on the table, a map spread out flat, corners weighted down with stones. I stepped inside, Sarah following close behind. The warmth was overwhelming after hours in the storm. I could barely think, could barely stand. I moved to the stove, holding my hands near it, trying to thaw my frozen fingers. Sarah was looking at the map. "Cole," she said quietly, "you need to see this." I joined her at the table. The map showed the area we were in, but it had been modified. Someone had drawn on it in red ink. Lines, dozens of them, crisscrossing the terrain in patterns that made no sense. Some lines ran straight through mountains, others curved in impossible spirals. And at certain points along these lines there were X marks, maybe 20 of them. One X was marked with a date, March 15th, 2009. Today's date. Another X, closer to what should have been the location of Morse's camp, was marked with his name, David Morse, and an arrow leading from that X to another X further west, marked only with a question mark. "What is this?" Sarah asked. I had no idea, but looking at that map, at all those lines and X marks, I felt sick. This was a record of something, a log, a tally. That's when I heard the footsteps outside. Slow, crunching in the snow, approaching the cabin. Sarah and I looked at each other, and without a word, we both moved away from the door. The footsteps came closer, reached the small porch outside, then stopped. The door swung open. A man stood in the doorway, tall, thin, wearing a parka that was too big for him. His face was weathered and dark, and his eyes were wrong. Not the color or the shape, but something about them. They didn't blink, didn't move, just stared at us with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "You followed the trail," he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. I told him we were lost, that we were searching for a missing hiker, that we needed help getting back to our camp. He smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. It was something wearing the shape of a smile. "Everyone follows the trail eventually. some sooner than others. Sarah asked who he was, what this place was. He ignored her and looked at me. You found David Morse's note. Don't follow the trail, but you followed it anyway. I told him we hadn't meant to, that we'd gotten lost in the storm. There is no storm, he said. And as he said it, I realized he was right. I couldn't hear the wind anymore, couldn't hear anything outside. I moved to the window and looked out. The night was perfectly still. No wind, no snow, just darkness and that trail, visible in moonlight that hadn't been there moments before. "What is this?" I demanded. "What's happening?" The man stepped fully into the cabin and closed the door behind him. The trail is old, older than the park, older than the maps. People have always walked it one way or another. Some find it by accident, some go looking for it. But once you're on it, you keep walking. David Morse understood that. He's walking still. Sarah pulled her radio, tried to call for help. Nothing but static. She reached for the door, but the man raised one hand. "You can leave," he said. "The choice is yours. But understand that you're on the trail now. You've seen the map, you know where it leads." "Where?" I asked. "Where does it lead?" He pointed at the map, at the lines that ran west, deeper into the wilderness, toward the mountains. To the end, where everyone on the trail goes eventually, where David Morse is walking now. I'd had enough. This was insane. I pushed past the man, ignoring his warning, and yanked the door open. Sarah was right behind me. We stepped out into the night and the cabin vanished. Just gone. 1 second it was there, solid and real, and the next there was nothing but forest and snow and darkness. But the trail remained, clear as day in the moonlight, winding away through the trees. "We follow it back," Sarah said. "Whatever direction we came from, we go back." We tried. We walked for what felt like hours, following the trail in what should have been the direction of camp. But the trail didn't lead to camp. It curved and twisted, always heading west, always pulling us deeper into the wilderness. Every time we tried to leave it, to push into the brush on either side, the terrain became impossible. Cliffs that shouldn't be there, ravines too steep to cross, walls of thorns that tore at our clothes. The trail was the only way forward. As dawn started to break, we finally admitted we were in real trouble. We were exhausted, dehydrated, and completely lost. Sarah's GPS was still showing garbage coordinates. My compass still spun uselessly. We had no idea where we were or how far we'd walked. That's when we saw him. A figure ahead of us on the trail, walking away. Dark jacket, no hat or gloves, walking steadily, never looking back. "Morse!" I shouted. The figure didn't stop, didn't turn around, just kept walking. We followed, moving as fast as our tired legs would allow. The figure stayed ahead of us, always just out of reach. We followed for an hour, maybe more, and then the trail opened up into a clearing. In the center of the clearing was a circle of stones, and in the center of that circle stood David Morse. He had his back to us, facing west toward the mountains. He was barefoot now, not even socks. His clothes were torn and his exposed skin was blue-white with frostbite. But he was alive, standing upright, and he was staring at something we couldn't see. "Morse!" I called out. "David Morse!" He didn't respond. I approached him slowly, Sarah hanging back. When I got close enough, I could see he was breathing, his breath misting in the cold air. But he didn't move, didn't acknowledge me at all. I touched his shoulder. His skin was ice cold, frozen solid, but he was breathing. "Morse, can you hear me? We're here to help you. We're going to get you out of here." Nothing, no response. I moved around to see his face. His eyes were open, staring straight ahead with that same empty intensity I'd seen in the man at the cabin. and he was smiling, but it wasn't a real smile. It was that same wrong smile, that same sense of something wearing a human expression without understanding what it meant. "He can't hear you," a voice said behind me. I spun around. The man from the cabin stood at the edge of the clearing, just where the trail entered. He looked exactly the same, like no time had passed. "What did you do to him?" Sarah demanded. "Nothing," the man said. "He's walking the trail, like they all do eventually, like you will." I'd had enough. I grabbed Morse's arm, tried to pull him away from that circle of stones. But he wouldn't move. It was like trying to move a tree. He just stood there, rooted in place, staring west. "You can't take him," the man said. "He's almost at the end. Another day, maybe 2, and he'll be there. Then he'll understand." "Understand what?" I shouted. "What's waiting? What's always been waiting?" Sarah raised her radio again, screaming into it for help for anyone. And this time, miraculously, it crackled to life. A voice came through, distorted but recognizable. The search coordinator. "Sarah! Cole, where are you? We've been looking everywhere. Your safety line snapped. You've been gone for 8 hours." 8 hours. It felt like days. Sarah gave our approximate coordinates based on the clearing, the mountains we could see. The coordinator said they'd send a helicopter, that they could see us on thermal. 15 minutes, he said. Hang on for 15 minutes. The man at the edge of the clearing shook his head. "They won't find you. Not here. You're on the trail now." But he was wrong. We heard the helicopter before we saw it, the thump of rotors cutting through the morning air. It appeared over the tree line, a bright red Coast Guard bird, and it circled the clearing twice before finding a place to land. The wind from the rotors blew snow and dirt everywhere. Sarah and I ran toward it, and I tried one more time to pull Morse with us. He still wouldn't budge. He just stood there in his circle of stones, staring west, smiling that empty smile. The helicopter crew helped us aboard, and as we lifted off, I looked back at the clearing. Morse was still standing there, getting smaller as we rose. And at the edge of the clearing, barely visible, the man from the cabin watched us go. The search for David Morse continued for another week. They found nothing. No trace of him beyond that bloody sock and the note we'd discovered. The clearing where Sarah and I had seen him standing? It didn't exist. They flew us back there once we'd recovered, had us point out the location. But there was no clearing, no circle of stones, no trail. Just dense forest and broken terrain. They interviewed us separately and together. What had we seen? Where had we gone? How had we gotten so far off course? We told them everything, exactly as it happened, and I watched their faces go from concern to skeptical to pitying. They thought we'd hallucinated, suffered some kind of shared delusion brought on by cold and stress and exhaustion. Maybe they were right. Maybe that's what it was. But then, how do I explain the map? The one I took from the cabin before we left. I slipped it under my jacket when Sarah wasn't looking, and when we got to the hospital, I hid it in my locker. I still have it. I've studied it hundreds of times, trying to make sense of those red lines and X marks. 2 of the X marks have names I recognize. David Morse, marked March 15, 2009. And another, older mark, dated August 3, 1997. The name is Thomas Brennan. I looked it up. Thomas Brennan was a wildlife photographer who disappeared in Denali in August 1997. Never found. There are 18 other X marks on that map. 18 other people who disappeared, I think. 18 people who found the trail. The official report on David Morse lists him as missing, presumed dead due to exposure. His family held a memorial service. I attended, though I'm not sure why, maybe to apologize for not bringing him home. maybe to see if they blamed me. They didn't. His sister thanked me for trying, said she knew David would have appreciated the effort. What I didn't tell her, what I haven't told anyone except Sarah, is that I still see him sometimes. Not in person, but in my dreams. He's always walking, always heading west, and he never turns around. And sometimes, when I'm out in the backcountry, I find things. A boot print in the snow that doesn't match any tread I know. A trail that appears on the ground but not on any map. A figure in the distance, walking away from me, never looking back. 3 months after Morse disappeared, Sarah quit the Park Service. She moved to Florida, as far from Alaska as she could get. We stayed in touch for a while, but eventually the conversations became too hard. We both knew what we'd seen, both knew it didn't make sense, and talking about it only made the impossibility worse. I kept working. What else was I going to do? But I requested a transfer away from the Denali district. I couldn't go back there, couldn't risk finding that trail again. Because I know, somehow I know, that if I found it a second time, I wouldn't be able to leave. I'd be like Morse, standing in a clearing that doesn't exist, staring at something no one else can see, waiting for the end of the trail. Last year, I was working a missing person case near Fairbanks. A hiker named Jennifer Park had failed to return from a day trek. We found her car at the trailhead, her wallet and phone locked inside. No sign of her on any of the established trails. On the third day of searching, I found something. A piece of paper tucked under a rock, just off the main trail. When I unfolded it, my blood went cold. 4 words, written in shaky handwriting, "Don't follow the trail." I called off the search in that area immediately. Made up an excuse, said the terrain was too dangerous, that we needed to focus elsewhere. The other searchers looked at me like I was crazy, but I didn't care. I knew what that note meant. Jennifer Park had found the trail, the same one Morse had found. And if we kept looking in that direction, one of us would find it too. We never found Jennifer Park. The case is still open. I think about her sometimes, and Morse, and Thomas Brennan, and all those other X marks on the map I keep locked in my desk. I think about where they are, where that trail leads, what waits at the end. And I think about the man in the cabin, if he was even a man, and what he meant when he said everyone walks the trail eventually. Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I take out that map and study those red lines. I've tried to make sense of the pattern, tried to figure out if there's a logic to where the trail appears. But it's like trying to read a language I don't understand. The lines twist and curve, connect and separate, and none of it makes any sense. But there's one thing I've noticed. The lines are spreading. When I first took the map, the lines covered maybe a third of the Denali area. Now, 7 years later, they seem to cover more. I know that's impossible. The map is ink on paper, it can't change. But every time I look at it, the lines seem to reach further, cover more ground. And there are new X marks. I swear there are. Marks that weren't there before, with dates that haven't happened yet. One of them is dated 3 months from now. The location is near where I live. And there's no name, just a question mark. I tell myself I'm imagining it. That stress and guilt and lack of sleep are playing tricks on me. But I know what I saw in that clearing. I know what I felt on that trail. And I know that some things in Alaska are older and stranger than we can understand, and they follow their own rules. David Morse is still out there somewhere, I believe that. Not dead, not exactly. Just walking. Following that trail to wherever it leads, unable to turn back, unable to stop. And someday, maybe soon, maybe years from now, someone else will find that trail. They'll see a figure walking ahead of them in the distance, and they'll follow, and they won't be able to turn back either. The note said, "Don't follow the trail." But Morse followed it anyway, and so did I, and so will others. Because that's what the trail does. It calls to you. It shows itself when you're lost and desperate, and it promises a way forward. And you follow because what else can you do? I put in for early retirement last month. The department approved it. I'm leaving Alaska, heading down to the lower 48, somewhere with cities and streetlights and places where you can't walk for more than a few hours without seeing another person. Somewhere safe. But I'm bringing the map with me. I can't leave it behind. Somehow I know it wouldn't let me. It's part of me now, part of my story, part of whatever contract I made when I stepped onto that trail in the storm. And sometimes, when I'm driving at night through empty country, I see it. Not the trail itself, but signs of it. A path through the trees that doesn't quite match the terrain. A figure in the distance walking away from the road. A feeling that if I just pulled over and walked into the darkness, I'd find something that's been waiting for me. Don't follow the trail. That's what the note said. That's what I tell myself every time I feel that pull. But I know it's only a matter of time. The trail is patient. It waited for Morse. It's waiting for me. It waits for everyone eventually. My last day with the state police is next Friday. There's a retirement party planned, a few speeches, the standard send-off. I'll smile and shake hands and accept their well wishes. I'll tell them I'm looking forward to a quieter life, and I won't mention that I've started seeing that figure in my dreams every night now. That man from the cabin, standing at the foot of my bed, pointing west. I won't mention that my compass has started spinning again, even though I keep it in a drawer. Or that I found a trail of wet footprints leading from my front door to my bedroom, sock prints, even though it hasn't rained in days. I won't mention that I can hear it sometimes, late at night. Footsteps outside my house, slow and steady, circling, waiting. And a voice, faint but clear, calling my name from somewhere far away. The map is spread out on my desk right now as I write this. The lines have grown again. They cover almost the entire page now, spreading like roots, like veins, connecting everything. And that X mark with the question mark? It's clearer now. I can see the location exactly. It's my house. The date is tomorrow. I should run. Should get in my car and drive and not stop until I'm thousands of miles away. But I know it won't matter. The trail finds you when it's ready. And once it does, there's no escape. You just keep walking, following those who went before, heading toward something you can't see but can somehow feel waiting. David Morse understood that. That's why he left his things behind, left his ID where someone would find it. He knew he wasn't coming back, knew he was starting a journey that had only one direction, west, always west, toward the end of the trail. My bags are packed. Not for retirement, not really. For whatever comes next. Because I know now what's going to happen. I've known since that night in the storm, since I stepped onto that impossible trail and followed that figure deeper into the darkness. I made my choice then, even if I didn't realize it. Tonight, I'll hear the footsteps again. Tonight, the voice will be clearer. And tonight, when I look out my window, I'll see it. The trail, appearing in my backyard where no trail should be, winding away into darkness, heading west. And I'll see him standing there at the edge of my property, David Morse, waiting for me, ready to show me the way. Don't follow the trail. But I will, I have to, because once you've seen it, once you've felt its pull, there's no turning back. You're marked, chosen, and eventually, when your time comes, you walk. The map shows 18 X marks. Soon, it will show 19. My name will join the others, another person who walked the trail and never returned. And someday, someone else will find this account, read these words and think I was crazy or lying or suffering from some kind of breakdown. But they'll remember. And when they're out in the wilderness, lost and afraid and desperate, and they see a trail that shouldn't be there, they'll think of this story. They'll remember the warning, and they'll follow the trail anyway. Because that's what it wants. That's what it's always wanted. Walkers. People willing to take that first step, to follow that figure in the distance, to see where the trail leads. I can hear them now, the footsteps. They're on my porch. Slow, steady, patient. Any moment now, there will be a knock at my door, or maybe no knock at all. Maybe the door will just open, and he'll be standing there, that wrong smile on his frozen face, his hand extended, inviting me to join him. The trail is calling. After 7 years, it's finally time. Don't follow the trail, but I'm already walking. My name is Sawyer Kendall, and I've been an Alaska State Trooper for 11 years. People who've never been to Alaska think they understand cold, think they know what winter means. They don't. Cold here is different. It's not just uncomfortable, it's alive somehow, a presence that seeps into everything, finds every crack and weakness, waits for you to make a mistake. And the rivers, when they freeze, they become something else entirely. Not water anymore, not quite land. Something in between, a liminal space where the rules change and strange things happen. I learned that the hard way in February of 2018, during a rescue operation that started with a simple emergency call and ended with me losing someone I'd worked with for 6 years. Ended with questions I still can't answer, and sounds I still hear when everything else goes quiet. It was a Wednesday, temperature sitting at -35, and I was finishing up paperwork at the station in Nenana when dispatch called. A snowmobiler had gone through the ice on the Tanana River about 15 miles upstream. The caller said they'd heard someone shouting for help but couldn't reach them. The ice was too thin, too unstable. They needed professionals. I grabbed my gear and called Tom Waverly, a fish and game officer who'd worked river rescues for over a decade. Tom knew the Tanana better than anyone, knew where the ice was safe and where the current ran too fast to freeze solid. If anyone could pull off a rescue in these conditions, it was Tom. We met at the boat launch and loaded our equipment into his truck. Ice rescue suits, throw ropes, a thermal blanket, first aid kit. Tom brought his ice auger and thickness gauge. As we drove toward the coordinates dispatch had given us, Tom explained the situation. "This time of year the ice should be solid," he said. 2-3 feet thick in most places, but there are spots where warm springs feed into the river, keep the water from freezing proper. You can't always see them from the surface. I asked how we'd find the victim if the ice wasn't safe to walk on. "Carefully," Tom said, "very carefully." We reached the access point about 20 minutes later. A truck was parked at the bank, and a man in his 50s stood next to it, stamping his feet and blowing into his hands. He introduced himself as Ray Hutchins, said he'd been the one to call it in. "I was checking my trapline when I heard it," Ray said. "Someone yelling for help. Sounded like it was coming from out there." He pointed toward the frozen river, a vast, white expanse stretching away in both directions. Tom asked if he'd seen anyone go through the ice. "No," Ray said. "Didn't see nothing, just heard the yelling. Lasted maybe 5 minutes, then stopped. I called you boys as soon as I got signal on my phone." I asked Ray to show us exactly where he'd heard the voice. We walked down to the river's edge, and he pointed to an area maybe 200 yards out. The ice there looked the same as everywhere else, smooth and white under a thin layer of snow. No obvious holes, no dark patches that might indicate thin ice. Tom pulled out his binoculars and scanned the area. After a minute, he lowered them and shook his head. "I don't see anyone out there. No snowmobile, no hole in the ice, nothing." "That's where the voice was coming from," Ray insisted. "I know what I heard." Tom and I looked at each other. We'd both worked enough rescues to know that sound can do strange things out here, especially in extreme cold. It can carry for miles, bounce off ice and snow, seem to come from places it doesn't. But we also knew that if someone had gone through the ice, every minute counted. In water this cold, you had maybe 10 minutes before hypothermia shut your body down. "We'll check it out," I told Ray. "You stay here with the truck. Keep the engine running in case we need a warm-up." Tom and I suited up in the ice rescue gear, bulky orange suits that would keep us afloat if we went through. Tom clipped a safety line to a tree at the bank and attached it to his belt. I did the same with the second line. If the ice gave way, these lines would be our only way back. We stepped onto the river ice. It was solid under our feet, thick enough that we could hear it creaking and groaning with the temperature stress, but not flexing or bending. Tom moved ahead of me, testing the ice every few steps with a metal probe he carried, checking for soft spots. We'd gone maybe 50 yards when I heard it. Faint, distant, but unmistakable, a voice calling out, "Help! Please help me!" I stopped. Tom had heard it too. He turned to me and I saw my own confusion reflected in his face. The voice seemed to be coming from ahead of us, out on the ice, but there was still no one visible. "Hello?" Tom called out. "Where are you? Call out again." Silence for a moment. Then the voice came back, clearer now. "I'm here, in the water. Please, I'm so cold." The voice was definitely coming from in front of us, but there was no hole in the ice, no break in the smooth white surface. Tom moved forward more quickly now, and I followed. The voice kept calling, sometimes loud, sometimes faint, always from the same direction. We reached the area where Ray said he'd heard the calls. Tom got down on his hands and knees, examining the ice carefully. It was solid, completely solid. No cracks, no holes, no thin spots. He drilled with his auger, and the ice was 30 inches thick. More than enough to hold our weight. "There's no one here," Tom said. But even as he spoke, we both heard it again, that voice crying out for help, and it sounded like it was right beneath us, muffled by the ice but close, so close. Tom looked at me. I've seen fear in a lot of faces over the years, but I'd never seen it in Tom's. Not until that moment. "That's not right," he said quietly. "That's not possible." I agreed, but I also couldn't ignore what I was hearing. Someone needed help, and they were under this ice somehow. I told Tom we should drill more holes, try to triangulate the location based on the sound. We drilled 3 more holes in a rough circle, each one showing solid ice all the way down to the water. And through each hole, when we put our ears close, we could hear it. That voice, calling up from the dark water below. "Help me, please. I'm dying down here." "This doesn't make sense," Tom said. He was getting agitated now, frustrated. "No one went through this ice. It's solid. It's been solid all winter. There's no way someone could be under there." But the voice kept calling, and then it said something that made my blood freeze colder than any temperature could. "Tom," it said. "Tom Waverly. Help me, Tom. It's so dark down here." Tom stumbled backward, nearly falling. "How does it know my name? How the fuck does it know my name?" I didn't have an answer. I pulled my radio and called back to Ray. Asked if he'd mentioned our names when he called dispatch. He said no. He'd just reported a person in distress. No names. The voice under the ice kept calling. Sometimes it used Tom's name. Sometimes it called mine, even though I hadn't said it out loud since we'd arrived. "Sawyer," it would call. "Sawyer Kendall, help us. We're all down here in the cold and the dark." Us. It said us. Tom had his satellite phone out, calling for backup. He requested a dive team, told them we had a possible person under the ice, gave them our coordinates. They said they'd send a team, but it would take at least 2 hours to mobilize. Tom told them to hurry. We waited. The temperature was dropping as the sun started its brief journey across the southern horizon. The voices continued, sometimes one, sometimes what sounded like multiple voices overlapping, all calling for help, all naming us, all coming from beneath solid ice that showed no signs of ever being broken. I walked in a wider circle, looking for any indication of how someone could be under this ice. Old holes that had refrozen, pressure cracks, anything. I found nothing. The ice was pristine, undisturbed except for our own drilling. That's when Tom called out to me. He was standing about 30 feet away, looking down at something. When I reached him, I saw what had caught his attention. In the snow covering the ice, there were marks. Not footprints exactly, but depressions, like something had been dragged across the surface. They led from the bank out to where we stood, then continued further out onto the river. We followed the drag marks. They went on for maybe another 100 yards, then ended abruptly in an area where the ice looked slightly different. Darker, somehow, though still solid. Tom drilled here, and his auger went through 32 inches of ice before hitting water. But when he pulled the auger back out, something came with it. Fabric. A piece of a jacket, frozen and torn, caught on the auger's threads. Tom held it up, examining it in the fading light. It was part of a snowmobile jacket, the kind sold at any outdoor store in Alaska. Could have belonged to anyone. But it proved that someone had been out here, that the voice we'd been hearing wasn't just some acoustic trick or our imagination. The voice called out again, louder now, more urgent. "Tom, Sawyer, please, we can't hold on much longer. It's so cold. The water is so dark." We can't hold on, plural again. How many people were down there? And how had they gotten under solid ice? Tom was breathing hard, his face pale. "This is wrong," he kept saying. "This is all wrong." I tried the radio again, checked on the status of the dive team. They were still at least an hour out. I told them to hurry, that we had evidence of at least one victim, possibly more. The sun was setting now, that brief twilight that passes for day in Alaska winter. We'd been out on the ice for almost 2 hours, and the cold was starting to get through even our insulated suits. I told Tom we should head back to the truck, warm up, wait for the dive team there. But Tom was staring at that dark patch of ice, the place where we'd found the fabric. "What if they're right there?" he said. "Right beneath this spot. What if we're standing on top of them and they're dying while we wait?" I told him the ice was too thick, that we'd checked, that there was no way to reach them without proper equipment. But I could see in his eyes that he wasn't listening. He was focused on that voice, on the idea that someone was drowning just feet below us, and we were doing nothing. "Tom," I said, "we need to wait for the dive team. We don't have the equipment to—" He wasn't listening. He'd pulled out a rescue axe from his kit and was moving toward the dark patch of ice. Before I could stop him, he swung the axe down hard, striking the ice with a crack that echoed across the river. "Tom, stop!" I grabbed his arm, but he shook me off. "They're right here," he said. His eyes were wild now, unfocused. "Can't you hear them? They're calling for us. We have to help them." He swung the axe again, and again. The ice began to crack, water seeping up through the breaks. I pulled on his arm harder, trying to drag him away, but he was stronger than me, driven by something I didn't understand. The ice beneath him gave way. It happened fast. One moment he was standing there, axe raised, and the next the dark ice simply collapsed inward, and he dropped through. I lunged forward, grabbing for him, and got a handful of his suit. The safety line jerked tight, holding him from going all the way under. But the current was strong here, stronger than it should have been, pulling at him. Tom's face was in the water, and I could hear him gasping, choking. I planted my feet and pulled, using all my strength to haul him back toward the solid ice. He came up sputtering, his face already going numb from the cold, and I managed to get him halfway out of the hole. That's when I saw them, down in the water, visible for just a moment in the last of the daylight. Faces, pale and bloated, eyes open and staring up at us. Not one face, dozens. A mass of bodies beneath the ice, tangled together, floating in the current. And they were moving, not just drifting, but actively moving. Reaching up toward Tom with hands that were too white, too delicate, fingers splayed and grasping. Tom saw them too. He screamed, a sound I'd never heard a grown man make, full of terror and revulsion. He thrashed, trying to get out of the water, and his movements made him slip further. One of those hands grabbed his ankle. I pulled harder, screaming for him to hold on, to stay with me. The safety line was cutting into my hands even through my gloves, but I didn't let go. I pulled, and slowly, inch by inch, I dragged him away from that hole, away from those reaching hands. We got maybe 10 feet from the hole before the ice beneath us started cracking in earnest. The sound was like gunshots in the silence, sharp cracks radiating out from where Tom had broken through. I could see the fracture lines spreading, feel the ice shifting under our weight. "Move!" I shouted. And we ran, or tried to run, slipping and sliding across the ice toward the bank. Behind us, I could hear more ice breaking, the sound of water rushing up through new holes. And beneath that, underneath everything, I could hear them. Those voices, dozens of them now, all calling out, all using our names, all begging us to come back, to help them, to join them in the dark and the cold. We reached the bank, gasping, our safety lines tangled and stretched to their limits. Ray helped pull us up onto solid ground, and we collapsed next to his truck. Tom was shaking violently, not from cold but from shock. I wasn't much better. "What happened out there?" Ray asked. "I saw the ice breaking, saw you running. What did you see?" I couldn't answer. Didn't know how to put it into words. Tom just sat there, staring back at the river, his face blank. The dive team arrived 40 minutes later. I briefed them on what had happened, or at least a version of it. I told them about the voice, about the piece of fabric we'd found, about the ice giving way. I didn't mention the faces in the water. Didn't mention the hands reaching up. They'd think I was crazy. The team suited up and went out onto the ice, approaching the area where Tom had fallen through carefully, testing every step. The hole he'd created had already started to refreeze, but they found it and set up their equipment. 2 divers went down while the rest of us watched from the bank. They were down for maybe 20 minutes. When they surfaced, they were shaking their heads. Nothing. No bodies, no evidence of anyone in the water. They dove 3 more times, searching in wider circles, and found nothing. The team leader came to talk to me. He was a big guy named Harris, had been doing dive rescues for 15 years. He looked puzzled, but not entirely surprised. "We didn't find anyone down there," he said. "No bodies, no sign of recent activity. The current's strong in that spot, though. If someone did go through the ice there, they'd be carried downstream, probably miles away by now." I asked about the fabric we'd found, the piece of jacket that Tom's auger had pulled up. Harris examined it, turned it over in his hands. "This has been in the water a while," he said. "Months, maybe longer. The material's degraded, frozen, and thawed multiple times. This isn't from today." But we'd heard the voices today. We'd heard them calling for help, using our names, speaking from beneath solid ice. I said as much to Harris. He gave me a look I'd seen before, the look people give when they're trying to decide if you're trauma-addled or just unreliable. "Sound does weird things out here," he said, "especially on the ice. Could have been someone calling from the bank, sound carrying across the river. Could have been the ice itself, making stress noises. People hear all kinds of things in conditions like this." I didn't argue. What was the point? I knew what I'd heard, knew what I'd seen in that water, but saying it out loud would just make me sound insane. The dive team packed up their equipment. They'd file a report, keep the case open, but without a body or a missing person report to match to, there wasn't much they could do. They advised us to stay off the ice in that area, said they'd mark it as dangerous on their maps. Tom and I drove back to Nanana in silence. When we reached the station, he got out of my truck without a word and walked to his own vehicle. I called after him, asked if he was okay, if he wanted to talk. He just shook his head and drove away. I didn't see Tom for 3 days after that. He called in sick, wouldn't answer his phone. On the 4th day, his supervisor called me, asked if I knew where he was. Tom hadn't shown up for work, wasn't answering his door. They were worried. I drove to Tom's house, a small cabin about 5 miles outside town. His truck was in the driveway, but the cabin was dark. I knocked, called his name, got no response. The door was unlocked. That should have been my first warning. Inside, the cabin was cold. The heat was off, and frost had formed on the windows. Tom's gear was scattered around the living room, like he'd been going through it frantically. Maps were spread across the table, marked up with red ink. I recognized the area, the stretch of the Tanana where we'd done the rescue attempt. Tom's bedroom door was open. I found him sitting on his bed, fully dressed, staring at the wall. He didn't acknowledge me when I came in. "Tom," I said, "everyone's worried about you. You okay?" He didn't look at me, just kept staring at that wall. "I can hear them," he said quietly. "All the time now. Even when I'm inside. Even with the doors closed. They're calling for me." I asked who was calling. "The people in the river," he said. "The ones we didn't save. They want me to come back. They say I belong with them now, down in the cold and the dark." I tried to tell him it wasn't real, that we'd been under a lot of stress, that the mind can play tricks, but he just shook his head. "I saw them, Sawyer. You saw them too. All those faces, all those hands. They've been there a long time, waiting, and now they know our names. Now they won't stop calling." I got Tom to his feet, made him pack a bag, told him he was coming to stay with me for a few days. He didn't resist. He moved like a sleepwalker, mechanical and distant. I drove him to my place in town, set him up in my spare room, made him eat something. He did what I asked, but without any real awareness, like his mind was somewhere else. That night, I woke to the sound of my front door opening. I ran to the living room and found it empty. Tom was gone. His boots and coat were still by the door. He'd walked out into the night in his socks and t-shirt, into temperatures that were pushing -40. I grabbed my gear and ran after him, following his tracks in the snow. They led straight through town, past dark houses and empty streets, heading toward the river. I caught up to him at the boat launch, the same place we'd started our rescue attempt 5 days earlier. Tom was standing at the edge of the ice, looking out at the frozen river. He was shivering violently, his exposed skin already showing signs of frostbite, but he didn't seem to notice or care. "Tom!" I grabbed his arm, tried to pull him back toward my truck. "What are you doing? You'll freeze out here." He turned to look at me, and his eyes were different. Empty somehow, like he was looking through me instead of at me. "They're calling," he said. "Can't you hear them? They need help. They're dying down there." "There's no one down there," I said. "The dive team checked. It's over, Tom. Let's go home." But he pulled away from me, surprisingly strong for someone who'd been sitting catatonic a few hours earlier. He stepped onto the ice, and before I could stop him, he was running, sprinting out onto the frozen river, heading for that dark patch where he'd broken through before. I chased after him, slipping and sliding, screaming his name. He was faster than me, driven by whatever was in his head. whatever he was hearing. He reached the dark patch and kept going, kept running, and I watched in horror as the ice beneath him gave way. He went through without a sound, just disappeared into that black water like it had been waiting for him. I ran to the hole, looked down, and saw nothing, just dark water, moving fast, carrying whatever it touched downstream. I jumped in after him. I know that sounds insane, but I didn't think, I just jumped. The cold hit like a hammer, drove all the air from my lungs, and the current grabbed me immediately, pulling me under. I could feel the water pressure, the ice above me blocking out what little light existed, and I thrashed, searching for Tom, finding nothing. My hand hit something. Not Tom, but something else, something that felt like fabric, like clothing wrapped around soft flesh. I grabbed it, pulled, and felt it move. Not the sluggish movement of something carried by current, but active movement, something pulling back. I let go and swam up, or what I thought was up. My lungs were burning, my limbs were going numb, and I couldn't tell which direction I was going. My hand hit ice, solid ice, and I realized I was trapped under it, that I'd been pulled away from the hole and was now beneath the frozen surface with no way out. I hammered at the ice with my fists, but it was too thick. I couldn't break through. The current kept pulling me, tumbling me, and I knew I had seconds before hypothermia shut my body down. I was going to die here, in the dark water beneath the ice, just like everyone else who'd ended up in this cursed stretch of river. Then something grabbed my ankle, a hand, strong and cold, and it pulled me. Not down, but sideways through the water. I couldn't see anything, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I just felt that hand pulling me through the darkness. And then I was at the surface, gasping for air, my head breaking through into painful cold air instead of water. I was at the bank, somehow, pulled up onto the snow. I rolled onto my side, coughing up river water, my body shaking so hard I couldn't control it. I looked back at the ice, trying to understand what had happened. A figure was walking away from the bank, heading back out onto the river. Dark clothes, moving steadily, not hurrying. It reached the dark patch where Tom had gone through and stopped. Turned to look back at me. Even from this distance, even in the darkness, I recognized the stance, the way he held his shoulders. Tom. He raised one hand, a simple gesture that could have been a wave or a dismissal. Then he turned back to the river and kept walking. The ice didn't break beneath him. He just kept going, getting smaller and smaller, until he vanished into the darkness, and I couldn't see him anymore. I managed to crawl to my truck and get the heat going. It took me almost an hour before I could stop shaking enough to drive. I went straight to the hospital, told them I'd fallen through the ice, spent the night under observation for hypothermia. They asked me questions about how I'd gotten out, and I lied. Said I'd pulled myself out, that adrenaline had given me the strength. They organized a search for Tom, divers, helicopters, search and rescue teams combing the river and the banks. They found nothing. No body, no tracks leading away, no sign of him. Tom Waverly was listed as missing, presumed drowned. His family held a memorial service a month later. I attended, sat in the back, said nothing. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen that night. About the hand that pulled me to safety, about Tom walking out onto the ice, not breaking through, just walking away into the darkness. Who would believe me? I barely believed it myself, but I knew the truth. Tom was still out there in that river, beneath that ice. He'd heard the voices calling, and he'd answered. He'd joined them, whatever they were, whoever they were. All those lost people beneath the frozen water, calling out to those above, luring them down. 3 weeks after Tom disappeared, I was working a different case near Fairbanks when I got a call from dispatch. Someone had reported hearing calls for help coming from the Tanana River, same stretch where Tom and I had done our rescue attempt. They wanted me to check it out since I knew the area. I told them no, made up an excuse, said I was too busy with my current case. They assigned it to someone else, a young trooper named Martinez. He went out there with a park ranger, checked the ice, drilled some holes. Found nothing, but he reported hearing voices, said they seemed to be coming from beneath the ice. They called his name, he said in his report. They knew who he was. Martinez requested a dive team. They found nothing, same as before. The case was closed, written off as acoustic anomalies. But Martinez put in for a transfer a week later, requested assignment anywhere away from the interior. I don't blame him. I've heard the stories now, going back decades. River rescue attempts in that stretch of the Tanana that go wrong. Experienced responders who hear voices, who report seeing faces in the water, who sometimes don't come back. The stories are usually dismissed, attributed to stress or cold, or the psychological strain of rescue work. But I know different. I know that something lives in that river, or exists there, or waits there. Something that collects the lost and the drowned and makes them part of itself. Something that calls out to the living, uses their voices, learns their names. Something that took Tom and tried to take me. I transferred to Anchorage 6 months after Tom disappeared. Couldn't stay in Nenana, couldn't work cases anywhere near that river. I told myself I was moving on, starting fresh. But the truth is, I was running. Running from the memory of Tom walking out onto the ice. Running from the knowledge that I'd been pulled from that water by hands that shouldn't exist. But you can't run from some things. Even now, 3 years later, I still hear them. Usually at night, when everything else is quiet. Voices calling from far away, calling my name, asking for help. Sometimes I recognize Tom's voice among them. Sometimes I hear voices I don't recognize, people who've been lost for years or decades, all of them calling from beneath the ice. Last winter, I was back in the interior for a training conference. On the last night, I couldn't sleep, so I drove out to the Tanana, to that stretch of river where everything happened. It was late, past midnight, and the temperature was below zero. The river was frozen solid, a smooth white expanse in the moonlight. I stood at the bank for a long time, just looking out at the ice. And I heard them, faint but unmistakable. Voices calling from beneath the frozen surface. Dozens of voices, maybe more, all speaking at once. Asking for help, using names I didn't recognize and some that I did. And then, clear as anything, I heard Tom. "Sawyer," he called. "Come back. Come join us. The water's fine once you get used to it. We're all here, all of us, waiting for you." I got back in my car and drove away. Drove straight through the night back to Anchorage, and I haven't been back since. But the voices followed me. Even here, hundreds of miles from that river, I hear them sometimes. When the wind blows a certain way, when the temperature drops, when everything else goes quiet, they call to me. They know where I am. Tom Waverly's case is still open. Missing, presumed dead. His body was never recovered. The official explanation is that he fell through thin ice while in a state of psychological distress and was carried away by the current. His family accepted that explanation because it's easier than the truth. But I know he's still there. Down in the dark water beneath the ice, part of whatever exists in that river. Still calling out, still trying to lure others down. And someday I know I'll hear his voice again. Not faint and distant, but close, right outside my door. And he'll ask me to come back, to finish what we started, to join him and all the others down in the cold and the dark. The dive team never found the bodies because the bodies don't stay bodies. Not down there. They become something else. Parts of something larger, something that's been there longer than any of us can imagine. something that feeds on the lost and the drowned and makes them into extensions of itself. I've done research, looked through old records and reports. People have been disappearing in that stretch of river for over 100 years. Trappers, prospectors, fishermen. Sometimes their bodies turn up downstream, sometimes they don't. But there are stories, passed down through local tribes, about the river having a hunger. About voices that call from beneath the ice, luring the unwary to their deaths. The stories say that the river remembers everyone who's died in it, that their voices remain trapped in the water, calling out forever. And anyone who hears those voices, anyone who goes looking for them, risks joining them. I believe those stories now. I've heard the voices. I've seen the faces beneath the ice. I've felt those hands pulling me down into the darkness. And I know that Tom heard them too, heard them calling specifically to him, until he couldn't resist anymore. Sometimes I wonder if he's happy down there, if happy is even a concept that applies, or if he's trapped, conscious and aware, screaming silently in the dark water, unable to die, unable to escape, just calling and calling for someone to save him. I hope he's not aware. I hope that whatever took him, whatever he became part of, didn't leave enough of Tom Waverly intact to suffer. But I don't think I'm that lucky. I think he knows exactly what he is now. And I think he wants me to join him so he won't be alone. My retirement papers are on my desk right now. I'm 34 years old, too young to retire, but I can't do this job anymore. Can't take the risk of being assigned to another river rescue, another missing person case near the Tanana. Can't trust myself not to hear those voices and follow them the way Tom did. I'm leaving Alaska entirely, heading to Arizona, to the desert, to a place where water is scarce and precious and doesn't freeze into solid sheets that hide dark currents and darker things underneath. I need heat and sun and distances I can see across. Need to be somewhere that the voices can't reach. But I know it probably won't matter. The voices aren't just in the river. They're in my head now, a constant whisper at the edge of hearing. And every body of water I see, every lake or pond, or even a large puddle, I wonder what's beneath the surface. I wonder who's down there calling out, waiting. Last week I was walking past a drainage ditch and I heard it. Faint but unmistakable. A voice calling my name from the water at the bottom. I ran. Literally ran. Sprinted away like a child afraid of the dark. Because I know what will happen if I stop to listen. I know where that path leads. Tom taught me that. Tom, who was stronger than me, smarter than me, more experienced in the wilderness. If it could take him, it can take anyone, and it's patient. It doesn't need to rush. It has all the time in the world, and voices that never stop calling. I leave for Arizona in 5 days. I've sold or given away most of my things, keeping only what fits in my truck, starting over. Starting clean, or trying to. But 3 nights ago, I had a dream. I was standing at the edge of the Tanana, looking out at the ice, and Tom was there, standing in the river, the water up to his waist but not moving, not flowing around him. Just still and dark and cold. "You can't run from it," he said. His voice was wrong, layered somehow, like multiple people speaking in unison. The river is everywhere. In every stream, every lake, every drop of water that falls from the sky. We're everywhere now, and we're waiting for you. Then he sank beneath the surface without a ripple, and the water went still, and I woke up with my sheets soaked in sweat despite the cold. I tell myself it was just a dream. Stress and trauma manifesting in my subconscious. But I know better. I know that Tom found a way to reach me, that the distance doesn't matter, that wherever there's water, the voices can call. 5 days until I leave. 5 days until I try to escape to the desert. And every night I hear them calling. Tom's voice mixed with dozens of others, all of them saying my name, all of them asking me to come back, to finish what we started, to join them in the dark and the cold. I don't think I'm going to make it to Arizona. I think one night, probably soon, I'll hear them calling and I won't be able to resist anymore. I'll walk out of my house the way Tom walked out of mine, and I'll go to the river, and I'll step out onto the ice, and this time there won't be anyone to pull me back. And then I'll be down there with Tom and all the others, calling up through the ice, using our voices to lure more victims, to build our numbers, to feed whatever it is that lives in the dark water beneath the frozen surface. The case file on Tom Waverly sits in my desk drawer. I look at it sometimes, read through the reports, study the map of where we found the fabric and where he went through the ice. And I notice something I hadn't seen before. There are other case files cross-referenced, other disappearances in that same stretch of river going back decades. 23 people in total, 23 names. 23 voices now calling from beneath the ice. Soon it will be 24. My name is Sawyer Kendall, and I've been an Alaska State Trooper for 11 years, and I can hear them calling right now, even as I write this, even though the nearest water is a lake 3 miles away. They're calling my name, and Tom's voice is clearest among them, and I know that soon, very soon, I won't be able to resist anymore. The voices never stop. That's what Tom tried to tell me in that dream. They never stop calling, never stop waiting, never give up. And eventually, everyone they call for comes to them. Eventually, we all join the voices beneath the ice. I can hear them now. They're singing. My name is Derek Haynes, and I've been an Alaska State Trooper for 14 years. I know this territory, know how to read tracks in snow, know the difference between someone lost and someone running. I've never failed to find what I was looking for, not in 14 years. Not until Marcus Webb. That case broke something in me over the 3 weeks we spent searching for a man whose tracks simply ended in the middle of nowhere. 3 weeks of following a trail that violated every law of physics I'd ever known. It started in January, deep winter. We got a call from a woman in Talk. Her husband, Marcus Webb, had gone out on his snowmobile 2 days ago and hadn't come back. 47 years old, experienced outdoorsman. He'd gone to check equipment at a hunting cabin 30 miles northeast of town. I took the case because I knew Marcus. Good man, careful, not the type to take stupid risks. His wife Janet showed me the route on a map, a straightforward path following an old mining road. Marcus had traveled it 100 times. I set out the next morning with another trooper, Chris Paulson. We loaded our snow machines with emergency gear. The plan was simple: follow the route to Marcus's cabin, bring him home. The morning was brutally cold, minus 38 at dawn. About 5 miles out, we found Marcus's tracks. Fresh snow machine prints, clear in the powder, heading in the right direction. We followed for 10 miles. The tracks stayed on the mining road, steady and consistent. Everything looked normal. Then at the 15-mile mark, the tracks veered off the road, heading northeast into open tundra. Not a sharp turn, just a gradual drift away from the established route. "Think he saw something?" Chris asked. Marcus knew this route. Why leave it? We followed the tracks into the tundra. They continued in a perfectly straight line, heading northeast at constant speed. We followed for 3 miles. The tracks never wavered, never turned. 3 miles off the road, we crested a rise. On the other side, something made me stop. The tracks were deeper now, like Marcus had been carrying extra weight. And alongside were footprints. Boot prints, human, walking beside the machine. They appeared suddenly at the top of the rise, no indication of where they'd come from. "Someone was with him?" Chris said. But Janet hadn't mentioned anyone else, and these prints appeared out of nowhere, as if someone had started walking alongside Marcus in the middle of nowhere. We followed both sets of tracks for half a mile. Then the boot prints stopped, just ended mid-stride, like whoever had been walking had simply vanished. The snow machine tracks continued, back to normal depth. Chris examined the spot. No sign of anything unusual. The person had simply ceased to exist at this point. We continued following Marcus's trail for another 5 miles, still heading northeast, still perfectly straight. A laser, straight line across the tundra. The tracks never deviated, never adjusted course. 10 miles from where we'd left the mining road, we crested another rise and saw Marcus's cabin in the distance. But we were approaching from the wrong direction. The cabin was southwest of our position, but Marcus's tracks were heading northeast, away from it. "He missed it," Chris said. "Drove right past his own cabin." Impossible. The cabin was visible from miles away, the only structure in this stretch of tundra. There's no way Marcus could have missed it, unless he'd been heading somewhere else. We checked the cabin. Undisturbed, cold, dark. No sign Marcus had been here. The generator was fine, untouched. No note, no indication why he might have continued past. We followed his tracks northeast. The landscape grew more difficult, but the tracks continued in that same straight line, up and over hills, through valleys, never turning. Around the 20-mile mark, our equipment started malfunctioning. GPS showing impossible coordinates, jumping randomly. My compass needle swung in circles, never settling. We were navigating purely by following Marcus's tracks now, our instruments useless. The tracks led us into an area I didn't recognize despite working this territory for over a decade. Steep hills, thick, stunted spruce, frozen streams cutting through narrow ravines. Everything looked the same, repeated endlessly. We'd been following the tracks for 6 hours when we crested a ridge and saw something that made my blood run cold. In the valley below, Marcus's tracks continued northeast. But now there were more boot prints, dozens of them appearing from nowhere walking alongside the snow machine tracks. They came from every direction, converging on Marcus's trail, joining it. Chris and I descended and examined the prints. All boot prints, roughly the same size, all walking in the same direction as Marcus. Some clear and deep, some faint and shallow, but all headed northeast, following that straight line. "This is wrong," Chris said, his voice shaking. "Where did all these people come from?" We were in the middle of nowhere, miles from any settlement. Yet, here were dozens of footprints, all following Marcus's snow machine. We followed the combined tracks for another mile. Then, suddenly, Marcus's tracks ended. Not gradually, not with a crash site, they just ended. One clear print, then nothing. Just snow and boot prints, dozens of them, continuing northeast without the snow machine. Chris and I stared at that last print. The print was normal, exactly like the thousands we'd been following. The snow around it was undisturbed. There was no indication of what had happened to Marcus or his machine. They had simply ceased to exist. We searched on foot, looked for any sign, any clue. Crash marks, fuel stains, pieces of the machine. Nothing. Just that last clear track, then empty snow, then those boot prints continuing on without him. We followed the boot prints for another quarter mile. They continued in that same straight line, never wavering. Then they started to fade, not all at once, but gradually, like they were sinking into the snow. One by one, the prints became shallower, less distinct, until they vanished entirely. We stood in the middle of the tundra, surrounded by emptiness, our compasses spinning uselessly, our GPS showing impossible coordinates. The tracks we'd been following for over 25 miles had simply disappeared. That's when I heard it. Faint, barely audible over the wind. The sound of a snow machine engine running somewhere in the distance, coming from the northeast. Chris heard it too. Is that Marcus? We followed the sound, riding slowly. It would get louder, then softer, like it was moving away and coming back, circling us at a constant distance. We rode for 20 minutes, and the sound never got closer or further away, just stayed at that same volume, always ahead of us. Then it stopped, cut off mid-rev, and the silence that followed was absolute. "Marcus!" I shouted. "Marcus Webb!" No response, just silence. We searched for another hour before admitting defeat. We were low on fuel, darkness was approaching, and we were completely lost. Our only option was to follow our own tracks back. The ride back was nightmarish. The darkness came fast and our headlights seemed too weak. Several times our own tracks seemed to disappear or go in wrong directions. We had to stop, search, find where the trail continued. It took us 9 hours to get back to Talk. We should have made it in 6, but the tracks we'd made were different on the way back, like the landscape had shifted. We filed our report. The coordinator organized a larger operation. Multiple teams, aircraft, everything. I briefed them on what we'd found. I could see the skepticism in their faces. But they went out anyway. The search went on for 2 weeks, covering 100 square miles. They found nothing. They found our tracks from that first day, followed them to where Marcus's trail had ended. But they found no sign of Marcus, no sign of his snow machine. The boot prints were gone. The searchers saw our tracks, saw where we'd stopped and searched, but they reported no other prints in the area. Marcus Webb was listed as missing, presumed dead. The case remained open but inactive. I couldn't let it go. I kept going back, following that route, trying to find something that would explain what happened. On the 3rd trip, I found something. Not tracks, but a feeling. A sense that I was being watched. On the 5th trip, I heard the engine again. That same distant sound. I followed it for hours, and just like before, it never got closer or further away. It stayed at that constant distance, leading me deeper. On the 7th trip, 2 months after Marcus disappeared, I found tracks again. Fresh snow machine tracks, heading northeast from the exact point where Marcus's had ended. I followed them for 10 miles. They ended just as Marcus's had. One clear print and then nothing. But this time, there was something else. Scratched into a flat rock near where the tracks ended were 4 words: "Don't follow the machine." The handwriting was rough, hurried. I recognized it. Marcus Webb's handwriting. I showed the photos to Janet. She confirmed it was Marcus's handwriting. She broke down, asking me what it meant. Where was her husband? I had no answers, just that warning scratched into stone, and the sound of an engine that ran somewhere in the empty places. The case file grew thicker as I investigated. I found records of other disappearances in that area going back decades. Trappers, prospectors, hunters who'd gone into that tundra and never returned. In 1976, a trapper named Robert Finch vanished. His snow machine was found, engine still running, in the middle of nowhere. No sign of Finch. In 1989, a geologist named Sarah Chen disappeared during a survey. Her colleagues reported hearing her snow machine engine for hours after she'd gone missing. Always distant, always moving. In 2003, a hunter named James Corrick went missing. Search teams reported finding tracks that ended abruptly. There were others. Cases closed with vague explanations or none at all. And in each case, the same things. Tracks that made no sense. Compasses that spun uselessly, the sound of engines running in the distance. Something was out there. Something that took people, took their machines, left behind impossible tracks and strange warnings. Something Marcus had encountered. I became obsessed. My sergeant tried to get me to back off, suggested counseling, but I couldn't stop. On my 12th trip, almost a year after Marcus disappeared, something happened. My snow machine's engine started acting strange. It would rev up on its own, the throttle responding to something other than my hand. I tried to stop, to shut it off, but it wouldn't respond. The machine kept going, following some path I couldn't see, heading deeper. We rode for what felt like hours. The landscape became stranger, hills that seemed to move, stands of spruce that appeared and disappeared. I knew I was seeing things that weren't possible, but it all felt real. Then my machine stopped, just shut off. I sat there, trying to understand where I was. Nothing looked familiar. The mountains were in wrong positions, the sun in the wrong part of the sky. That's when I saw them. In the distance, figures standing in a line. Maybe a dozen, all facing my direction, all perfectly still. I pulled out my binoculars. They were people, men and women dressed in winter gear from different eras. Modern snowsuits, older clothing, furs and canvas from decades past. All standing motionless, watching me. And in the center, I saw him. Marcus Webb, same jacket he'd worn when he left home. His face was pale, expression blank, eyes hollow and empty. He didn't wave, didn't acknowledge me, just stood there with the others, watching. I called out to him, "Marcus, it's Derek Haynes. I'm here to bring you home." No response. None of them moved. They just stood there, watching me with empty eyes. I tried to start my machine. Dead. Completely unresponsive. I got off and started walking toward the figures crunching through the snow. They didn't move as I approached. I got within maybe 50 yards when something stopped me. Not a physical barrier, but a feeling so strong it was like hitting a wall. A sense that if I took one more step, I would join them. I would become one of them, standing in that line, staring with empty eyes. I stopped. I wanted to save Marcus, but I couldn't take that step. Whatever had taken him, I wasn't strong enough to face it. I backed away, slowly. When I'd retreated about 100 yards, my snow machine started on its own. I ran to it, threw myself onto the seat and let it take me wherever it wanted. This time, it took me home. When I reached Talk, the machine returned to normal. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen. They already thought I was losing it. But I stopped going back. I'd seen the truth. Marcus wasn't missing. He was exactly where he needed to be, part of something I couldn't understand and couldn't fight. Janet eventually accepted her husband was gone. She sold the cabin, moved to Anchorage. The memorial service held the standard lies about dying doing what he loved. The case remains open, missing, presumed deceased. But I know different. Something exists out there in that tundra, something that calls to people, takes them and their machines, adds them to some collection of the lost. If you go into that wilderness, if you follow the old mining road northeast of Talk, you might see tracks heading off into nowhere. You might hear an engine running in the distance. And if you follow those tracks, if you chase that sound, you might see them. That line of figures standing in the snow, watching, waiting for you to take that final step and join them. I still hear it sometimes. The sound of a snow machine engine running somewhere far away. It's Marcus, I think. Or maybe all of them. Everyone who's been taken. Running their machines through some space between spaces, forever chasing something they can never reach. I transferred to Fairbanks a year after Marcus disappeared. Couldn't stay and talk. But distance doesn't help. The sound follows me. Chris Paulson quit 6 months after our search. Last I heard, he was working security in Seattle, as far from Alaska as he could get. I keep the rock with Marcus's warning. It sits on my desk at home. Don't follow the machine. But people do follow. Every few years, someone disappears in that area. The official explanations vary, but I know the truth. They heard the engine. They saw the tracks. They followed. And now they're standing in that line, watching the wilderness with empty eyes, waiting for the next person to come looking. 3 months ago, a trooper from Talk called. A hunter had reported hearing a snow machine at night, miles northeast of town. I told him not to worry about it. But last week, he called again. He'd gone out to investigate. He'd found tracks heading northeast from the mining road. He'd followed them before his GPS malfunctioned and his compass stopped working. He'd gotten scared and turned back, but before he left, he'd heard voices carried on the wind. Multiple voices calling out names. And one of those names had been his. I told him to stay away from that area. He asked what I meant, and I said I couldn't explain, but he needed to trust me and stay away. He's young, ambitious, probably won't listen. He'll go back, follow those tracks, chase that sound. And one day, I'll get a call that he's missing. And then there will be one more person standing in that line. The sound is getting louder. I hear it almost every night now, that distant engine. It's calling me, reminding me that I came close, that I almost took that final step, that there's still a place for me in that line of watchers. My retirement papers are filled out. I'm leaving Alaska, heading somewhere warm. Maybe I can forget, but I know I won't. I'll hear that engine wherever I go. I'll see Marcus's empty eyes when I close my own. I'll remember that warning scratched into stone. My name is Derek Haynes, and I've been an Alaska State Trooper for 14 years, and I know where Marcus Webb is, and I know I can never tell anyone, because the truth is too impossible to believe. The tracks are out there right now, fresh prints in the snow, heading northeast from the mining road. And somewhere at the end of those tracks, a line of figures stands waiting, their machines running forever in the space between spaces. And sometimes, on the very coldest nights, I can hear them all. Not just one engine, but dozens, all running in unison, all heading in the same direction, all following something I can't see toward a destination I can't imagine. The compass on my desk is spinning right now. The GPS on my phone shows impossible coordinates. And outside, carried on the wind, I can hear it. The sound of a snow machine running somewhere in the distance, getting closer. My name is Archer Cole, and I've been an Alaska State Trooper for 17 years. In that time, I've learned that maps lie. They show you boundaries and landmarks, structures that exist on paper but nowhere else. They make you believe that everything has been cataloged, that there are no blank spaces left in the world. I know better now. I know that some places exist in the spaces between the lines on the map, places that appear when they want to be found and disappear when they're done with you. It started with a radio call on a Tuesday afternoon in early December. I was at the station in Eagle when dispatch patched through a transmission on one of the emergency frequencies. This is Ranger Station 7 Delta, calling any Alaska State Police unit in the area. We have a situation here that requires immediate assistance. Medical emergency, possible fatality. Our coordinates are... And he read off a string of numbers that I copied down carefully. The dispatcher asked him to repeat. The line went dead. I pulled up the coordinates on my GPS. They placed the ranger station about 40 miles northwest of Eagle. I knew the area well, but I didn't know anything about a Ranger Station 7 Delta. I called the National Park Service office in Fairbanks. The woman checked their records and came back confused. "We don't have a 7 Delta designation," she said. "There's nothing at that location according to our maps, just wilderness." But someone had called for help. I loaded my truck with gear and headed out. The road ended at an old mining camp, and I transferred to my ATV for the last 12 miles. At 3 miles out, my GPS started malfunctioning. The distance kept jumping from 3 miles to 15 and back again. My backup GPS did the same thing. My compass needle swung in lazy circles, never settling on north. The landscape changed as I continued. The trees grew thicker, darker. The light seemed wrong, too dim for mid-afternoon. Then I crested a ridge and saw it. In the valley below was a log building. Smoke rose from a chimney. Light glowed in the windows. I rode down. As I got closer, I noticed the building looked old but well-maintained. The construction from maybe the 40s or 50s. An antique Jeep sat outside, Forest Service green, looking impossibly preserved. I knocked. A man in a vintage ranger uniform opened the door. 50s, gray hair, weather-worn face. "You got here fast," he said. "I only called 20 minutes ago." Inside felt like stepping into 1967. Old metal desks, wood stove, maps showing boundaries that no longer existed. Vacuum tube radio equipment. A calendar on the wall showing December 1967. A younger ranger stood by the stove. On a cot lay a man wrapped in blankets, pale and shivering. The older ranger introduced himself as Hank Morrison. The injured man was Carter. Morrison explained they'd found him unconscious in the snow 3 miles from the station. I checked Carter's vitals. Hypothermic but stable. I tried my radio to request evacuation. Static. Satellite phone. Same thing. Morrison nodded like he'd expected this. As Morrison worked his antique radio, getting only static and fragmented voices, I studied the room more carefully. Everything was authentic to the 60s. Nothing modern anywhere. "How long have you been stationed here?" I asked Morrison. "This is my 14th winter at 7 Delta," he said. "Started in 54, right after Korea." The math didn't work. If he'd started in 1954, he'd been here over 50 years. But he looked 50s at most. Carter's eyes opened. "Who are you?" His voice was hoarse. Before I could answer, he grabbed my arm. "Did you see it? Out there in the trees, something was tracking me. It was big, bigger than a bear. It knew where I was going." Morrison pulled Carter's hand away. "He's delirious. Hypothermia affects the mind." But Carter's eyes were clear. "You need to leave before dark. Once it's dark, you won't be able to find your way out." Morrison said it was already 3:30, too late to make it back before nightfall. Traveling in the dark would be suicide. He was right. I agreed to stay. After dinner, Morrison tried the radio again, getting only those strange, fragmented voices. As darkness fell, I heard movement outside. Something large circling the station. "It comes most nights," the younger ranger, Driscoll, said quietly. "Just walks around the perimeter." Around 9, Carter woke screaming about eyes in the dark, something calling his name. When he calmed, he whispered, "It's out there right now, looking in." Morrison closed the curtains. "Best not to look, seems to know when you're watching it." Around midnight, unable to sleep, I found Morrison at his desk writing in a logbook by lamplight. I asked about the station, why it wasn't on any maps. 7 Delta was established in 1952, he said. Cold War observation post. When it became obsolete, most were shut down. But not this one. Someone needed to maintain the boundary. I looked at his logbook. The entries were dated December 8, 1967. Today was December 8, 2015. "Your log date is wrong," I said. Morrison looked at me with sad eyes. "Is it?" Driscoll appeared in the doorway. "You're figuring it out." Morrison sighed. Ranger Station 7 Delta exists in a fold in the landscape. In 1967, we found something in the woods, a doorway. It opened. We managed to close it, but the act trapped us here in this moment. We're stuck, maintaining the boundary. Carter's new, Morrison continued, arrived 3 weeks ago from your time, got caught in the fold like we did. I moved to the door. Morrison didn't stop me. You can try, but you won't find your way out in the dark. The fold is stronger at night. I stepped outside. The cold felt wrong, thicker. At the tree line stood something tall enough that its head was level with the lower branches. I couldn't make out details, just a dark shape watching. Then I heard my name in my mind, multiple voices speaking as one. Archer Cole, you don't belong here. You can still leave, but if you stay until morning, you'll be ours. You'll stand watch forever in this moment that never ends. I went back inside. Morrison said, You saw the warden. It guards this place. When we closed the doorway, we trapped it too. Carter sat up. They didn't call for medical assistance. That was a lie. They need someone to replace me. If you stay until morning, the fold will have you. Morrison didn't deny it, just stared into his coffee. You can leave, Carter told me. Right now, I'll guide you. I've been mapping the fold. There's a path out. I looked at Morrison and Driscoll. Something like hope flickered in their eyes. I'm sorry, I told them, but I'm not staying. Carter led me outside. The warden moved, trying to cut off our escape. Carter pulled a compass from his pocket, spinning wildly. This way, he said, and ran. We plunged into the woods. The trees were too close, the ground shifting. Behind us, the warden followed. Carter navigated by his spinning compass, taking turns that seemed random but weren't. Then we broke through to the slope where I'd first seen the station. The valley below was empty. No building, no light, just wilderness. We're out, Carter gasped. My GPS worked normally now. We were exactly where the ranger station should have been, but there was nothing here. We made it back to Eagle. I took Carter to the medical center, filed a simplified report. Carter left Alaska a week later, gave me his compass before he went. Might help if you ever need to find your way out of somewhere you shouldn't be. I haven't been back. But sometimes, late at night, I tune my radio to that emergency frequency. Most times, there's nothing. But sometimes I hear a voice calling for assistance. Sometimes it's Morrison. Sometimes Driscoll. Sometimes someone new. 3 months ago, I got a call from the National Park Service. They were updating their historical records and had found references to a Ranger Station 7 Delta in documents from the 60s. They wanted to know if I knew anything about it since I worked that area. I told them I didn't know anything. The woman on the phone said that was odd because they'd found a manifest showing supplies delivered to 7 Delta in December 1967, signed for by Rangers H. Morrison and W. Driscoll. The delivery driver had noted difficulty finding the station, said it seemed to appear and disappear depending on how you approached it. After that delivery, all records of 7 Delta ceased. No more supply requests, no more status reports, nothing. The station had simply vanished from all official documentation. It's probably just paperwork errors, the woman said. Records from that era aren't always reliable, but it's strange, don't you think? I agreed it was strange and ended the call. Last week, I was organizing my office and found something that made my blood run cold. A logbook, old and worn, hidden at the back of my filing cabinet. I don't remember putting it there, don't remember taking it from the ranger station. But there it is. The logbook Morrison had been writing in that night. I opened it and found pages and pages of entries, all dated December 8th, 1967, all in Morrison's handwriting. Hundreds of entries, maybe thousands, all from the same day. But at the very back of the book, in different handwriting, there's one more entry. The date is December 8th, 2015. Last night's date. It reads, Trooper Cole visited. Seemed like a good man. Hope he makes it out. Hope he doesn't come back. We don't need another soul trapped here. Morrison and Driscoll are fading. Not sure how much longer we can maintain. The warden grows stronger. The boundary weakens. If someone doesn't properly close the doorway soon, something will break through. And then nowhere will be safe. The entry is signed Carter Webb. But Carter left Alaska a year ago. He's in Oregon, living with family, trying to forget. I called him yesterday to check, got his brother, who told me Carter was doing fine, was working a job in Portland, was moving on with his life. So how is his writing in a logbook from a place he escaped? How did that logbook get into my office? I keep the logbook locked in my desk now. I don't look at it often, but sometimes I take it out and flip through the pages reading Morrison's repetitive entries, his slow realization that he's trapped in a loop. And I read Carter's final entry, that warning about something breaking through. Sometimes at night I think about Morrison and Driscoll, still standing watch in their ranger station that exists outside of time, maintaining a boundary between our world and something else. I think about the warden, circling endlessly, making sure they don't leave. And I wonder how long they can hold. The radio calls are becoming more frequent. I hear them several times a week now, on that same emergency frequency. Different voices, different stations, but always the same message. This is Ranger Station calling for assistance. We have a situation here. And I wonder if the fold is growing, if it's reaching out, trying to snare more people into its endless December day. I wonder if other places are getting trapped, other stations, other people who answered the wrong call or followed the wrong coordinates. Last night, I had a dream. I was standing in front of Ranger Station 7 Delta, but it was different. Older, more decayed. The roof was sagging, the logs were rotting, and through the windows I could see figures moving inside. But they weren't Morrison and Driscoll anymore. They were shadows, barely human-shaped, going through motions they'd performed so many times they'd become automatic. And behind the station, at the tree line, the warden stood watching. Taller now, more solid, less like a shadow and more like something real. As I watched, it turned its head toward me, and I felt its attention lock on like a searchlight. Archer Cole, it said, using that voice that was many voices. The boundary is failing, the doorway is opening. When it opens fully, we will all be free. But freedom comes with a price. The fold will expand. The December day will spread, and everyone will maintain the boundary, just like Morrison and Driscoll. I woke up with my sheets soaked in sweat despite the cold, and I could hear my radio crackling in the other room. I got up and went to check it. The radio was off, unplugged, but I could still hear it. A voice, faint but clear, coming from the speaker. This is Ranger Station 7 Delta calling Trooper Archer Cole. We need you to come back. We need you to close the doorway properly. We can't hold it much longer. Please respond. I didn't respond. I unplugged the radio completely, took the batteries out. But I could still hear it, that voice calling my name, asking me to come back. The compass Carter gave me sits on my desk. I watch it sometimes. It spins slowly, constantly, never settling on north. Always pointing in the same direction relative to my position. Always pointing northwest, toward where Ranger Station 7 Delta exists in its pocket outside time. My retirement is coming up in 3 months. I've already bought a house in Arizona as far from Alaska as I can get. I'm leaving the wilderness, leaving the cold, leaving the places where boundaries blur and reality folds in on itself. But I know it won't matter. The fold is growing. The calls are becoming more frequent. The warden is getting stronger. And sooner or later, the doorway will open fully, and everything Morrison and Driscoll and all the others have been holding back will come through. When that happens, there won't be safe places anymore. The fold will spread, the December day will expand, and we'll all be trapped in our own loops, maintaining boundaries that should have been properly closed decades ago. I should go back, I know that. I should try to finish what Morrison and the others started in 1967, close that doorway the right way. But I'm afraid. Afraid of the fold, afraid of the warden, afraid of becoming another voice on the radio calling out for help that will never come. So, instead, I'm running. Moving to Arizona, trying to put as much distance between myself and that ranger station as possible. And every night I tell myself it's the right decision, the smart decision. But every night I hear the radio. Every night the compass spins. Every night I feel the fold reaching out trying to pull me back. 2 days ago, I found another entry in the logbook. I checked it just last week, and there was nothing new. But now there's a fresh entry, the ink still wet, dated today. Trooper Cole, if you're reading this, you need to understand something. The fold isn't just holding us, it's using us to hold itself together. We're like anchor points, keeping it stable, keeping it small. If we let go, if we stop maintaining the boundary, the fold will collapse. But a collapse doesn't mean it disappears. It means it spreads, unfolds, spreads out across the landscape like ink and water. Ranger Station 7 Delta will become Ranger Station 7 everything. The December day will become December forever. You need to come back. You need to help us close it properly before it's too late. Before we all run out of strength. Please. Morrison. The handwriting is shaky, barely legible. Morrison is fading, losing coherence, becoming more shadow than man. And when he fades completely, when there's no one left to maintain the boundary, the fold will spread. I'm looking at plane tickets to Arizona. My retirement is in 3 months, but I'm thinking about leaving early. Getting out of Alaska before winter fully sets in, before the darkness and cold make travel impossible. But I know I'm not going to Arizona. I know where I'm really going. Tomorrow morning, I'm loading my truck with enough supplies for a week. I'm taking my ATV, my survival gear, my weapons. I'm taking Carter's compass and Morrison's logbook. And I'm heading northwest, back to those coordinates where a ranger station exists outside of time. I'm going back to 7 Delta. I'm going to try to close the doorway properly, to end the loop, to free Morrison and Driscoll and everyone else who's gotten trapped there over the decades. I'm going to try to stop the fold from spreading. Probably I'll fail. Probably I'll become just another voice on the radio, another soul trapped in that endless December day. Probably I'll spend eternity standing watch in a ranger station that shouldn't exist, maintaining a boundary I don't fully understand, but I have to try. Because if I don't, if the fold spreads, if the December day expands to swallow everything, then we'll all be trapped. Every ranger station, every trooper post, every isolated outpost in the Alaska wilderness will become its own pocket of frozen time, and everyone in them will be maintaining boundaries between here and somewhere else. The radio is calling right now. Morrison's voice, weak and fading, asking me to come back. The compass is spinning, and somewhere 40 miles northwest of Eagle, in a valley that doesn't appear on any map, smoke rises from the chimney of Ranger Station 7 Delta. I'm leaving at dawn. I've written this account and locked it in my office safe, to be opened if I don't return in 7 days. If you're reading this, it means I failed. It means I'm part of the fold now, trapped in that December day, maintaining the boundary with Morrison and Driscoll and all the others. If that's the case, if I haven't returned, then do me one favor. Don't come looking for me. Don't follow the coordinates. Don't answer the radio calls. Because the fold is hungry, and it's always looking for new souls to anchor it in place. Let Ranger Station 7 Delta fade into legend, into rumor, into a story that state troopers tell each other late at night. Let it become one of those impossible tales that everyone has heard but no one quite believes. Because believing means you might go looking, and looking means you might find it, and finding it means you'll never leave. The warden is waiting, the doorway is opening, and the December day is spreading. My name is Archer Cole, and I've been an Alaska State Trooper for 17 years, and tomorrow I'm going to try to save everyone by walking into a place that exists outside of time, and I know I'm probably never coming back. And the compass keeps spinning, and the radio keeps calling, and somewhere in a valley that shouldn't exist, smoke rises from a chimney in an endless loop, and Morrison is waiting, and Driscoll is waiting, and the warden is waiting, and they're all waiting for me to come back and close the doorway or become part of the fold. And I think I know which one is more likely, and the logbook is open on my desk with fresh ink appearing as I watch. New words forming that say hurry and please and before it's too late. And outside my window, the compass needle swings to point northwest. Always northwest. And I can hear footsteps circling my house, heavy and wrong. And I know the warden has found me. And I know it's telling me that the choice has already been made. And tomorrow when I leave for 7 Delta, I won't be trying to close anything. I'll be answering a summons that was issued 48 years ago, and the December day is spreading, and the fold is opening, and somewhere a door that should have stayed closed is swinging wide, and on the other side, something is waiting that's been waiting since before time had meaning, and it knows my name. It knows all our names, and it's calling us home.